Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters and friends, and welcome to Lighthouse Live. So, what is Lighthouse Live all about? Well, brothers and sisters, what it is really talking to you about our amazing, unique, transformative project, which is Lighthouse Mentoring. And Lighthouse Mentoring is, as I said, quite unique and transformative because what we aim to do is we aim to give 1 hour free sessions to people who have doubts, to people who have questions about Islam, to non-Muslims, to ex-Muslims, and also specifically and importantly, we give these one-to-one mentoring sessions to mashayikh, scholars, students of knowledge, imams, teachers, and community leaders, so we could help them on the journey with regards to articulating a positive and compassionate and intellectual case for Islam to the wider community and to their sphere of influence. And when I say, we aim to do this, we've been doing it. And if you've been in touch during Ramadan, I'd like to thank every single one of you because you gave us the opportunity to basically expand the service. And even though we've expanded the service, I think we have bookings until December or next year, January. So we're really booked. There are some spaces to fill in as well, of course, and we want to continue to expand the service. So Lighthouse Mentoring is one of its kind from that perspective, because not only do we want to answer questions, but we want to basically help take people on the intellectual and spiritual journey so they can become the future leaders, or at least enhance their leadership with regards to the dawah, with regards to intellectually and compassionately sharing and defending the tradition, sharing and defending Islam. So we have with us today our beloved brother Yusuf Ponders. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Good to see you, bro. May Allah bless you. Yusuf's been working very hard today. Today he had around two Lighthouse sessions. I also had 2 Lighthouse sessions as well. I had a young student, I think he was a young student, he was 18 years old, and I had a brother who actually is taking leadership in New Zealand to basically get involved in sharing Islam and contributing to the community. So he wanted some advice. So I gave him some advice with regards to vision and strategy. So this is very important. Oh, and we have with us our beloved brother Fahad Taslim. So just to summarize, brothers and sisters, Lighthouse Mentoring Service is a unique and transformative service where we aim to give people 1 hour, free 1 hour sessions so we can mentor them in order for them to enhance their dawah capabilities so they could become the best version of themselves intellectually and also from a character point of view, so they could make an impact in the dawah, so they could really share Islam academically and intellectually. But at the same time, we deal with people's doubts, with shubuhat. We also help ex-Muslims come back to Islam, and new Muslims, we help them with regards to their questions and so much more. It's a phenomenal service and it's free. And again, I just want to reiterate my gratitude, first and foremost, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also to all of you, because if you were in touch with us during Ramadan, you actually noticed that we were actually fundraising for this project and alhamdulillah, we expanded it. And even though we've expanded it, we have bookings into around December or January. So whoever wants to get involved, please get in touch via our website. And what we want to do with the rest of this live stream, after Yusuf introduces himself and says what he wants to say about the whole project, and Sheikh Fahad, is that we want to give you opportunity to basically get some of your questions answered, or we could help you with regards to mentoring you, even if it's for a short period, to help you on how to move forward in the dawah. And just before I continue and give it to Yusuf, just to remember what I was talking about, one of the Lighthouse mentoring services I had today with the brother from New Zealand, he wanted to enhance his dawah. So when I analyzed his question and his story, I felt that what he needed was a vision exercise and a strategy exercise. So I gave him access to our work to be able to understand what it does it mean to have a vision for yourself and a vision for your community and a vision overall with regards to where you want to see the world, where you want to see the dawah, where you want to see New Zealand, right? And I said, once you get that ironed out, you now have to develop a strategy. And a strategy is one action or a set of actions which are necessary, which you feel are necessary based on your environment and your sphere of influence and your skill set, actions that are necessary in order for you to fulfill your vision. And that was very important in order for him to start from the beginning and work his way up. So everything that he does is has a huge impact with regards to the vision that he has. At the same time, I gave him some advice on shura. You have to have consultation with all the members of your community. You know, this individualism that in the dawah doesn't work. In actual fact, it wastes a lot of resources. You need to contact the existing ulama, mashayikh, people of influence, people who are involved in the dawah, and come together. You don't have to work together, but at least come together and do shura consultation, and at the same time you'll be able to share lessons learned and not repeat other people's mistakes, and maybe enhance other people's work as well. So you have to have this kind of health check mindset analysis where you ask yourself the question, what is unhealthy in the dawah? If something's unhealthy, then you should make it healthy. What is missing in the dawah? If something is missing, then you try and fill the gap. What is basically really good in the dawah? You make dua for it, or you repeat it if necessary, or you continue and replicate it if necessary, or you support existing people, organizations. So that's just a very quick summary of what we spoke about. And as you can see, we give a wide range of advice. It's not just about dealing with doubts or arguments, but it's also enhancing their leadership and enhancing the dawah. And we speak to imams, mashayikh, students, parents, and so on and so forth. So without further ado, let's hear something from our beloved Yusuf, and then we have Fahad. Then we'll take your questions and we'll try and replicate what we do at the mentoring sessions, inshallah. Brother Yusuf.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So yeah, no, it's I've been really enjoying the sessions that I've had so far. They've been very wholesome, and what you generally find there's a common theme. The people that are kind of joining or trying to seek the service find it hard to sort of find this service elsewhere. Like they don't really have anywhere that they can go and speak to people. And when they do try, often the people they speak to get anxious and maybe just sort of power them off and go, oh, Dubala, like how dare you ask questions? This kind of thing, which isn't obviously very helpful when someone's sort of really suffering from some sort of major shubahat or something that's really giving them bad anxiety as a result of not being able to sort of think the problems through. And often the time they're quite simple to overcome. It's just getting them to sort of think critically about the problems that they're putting forward. And the majority of the time, like 8 times out of 10, it's just sort of guiding them through the process, not just answering the questions, but giving them the tools in order to be able to sort of go away and deal with these kind of things on their own as well. So yeah, it's really wholesome. The one that I did today was really nice. May Allah bless the brother. By the end of it, he was incredibly grateful for the opportunity to just have like a nice, normal conversation with someone and sort of go through these issues that he's been having. So yeah, it's a great little project. I'd like as well to maybe call people who think that they have the skill set in order to sort of help with it. We do have a volunteer form, which I shall show you now. And if you think you can maybe help with the service at all, and you've got, it's not learn, what am I doing? Request. So you go here, so you go to sapiensinstitute.org, request, there's a volunteer form. And then once you click that, there's a number of other things that you can help with the Sapiens Institute in general. So there's social media marketing, video editing, design, administration, all of these things, education and research. And if you have some spare time and you want to do something for the sake of Allah, obviously we'd be more than happy to sort of have you help us with anything that you can do. So you just fill in the details here and you give a brief explanation of why you would like to volunteer, and you upload your CV. Obviously you click the anti-extremist guidance agreement, submit, and then from there we can review the volunteer form, and where we think it's possible to sort of get some decent help from anyone, we will consider taking them on board. So there's still a few spaces we need to fill on that timesheet that we've got at the moment. And yeah, so we'll be looking at expanding the team, inshallah, and trying to get people on. So other than that, yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm grateful to be a part of that service as well. Something I find very rewarding. May Allah accept it from all of us. And inshallah, I look forward to seeing how it expands and how it sort of grows into the future.
Yeah, all right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulil Karim amma ba'd. So yeah, I'm just gonna kind of piggyback off of what our other two gentlemen here have said. One of the things I'll just add that perhaps kind of goes behind what Hamza was mentioning a bit earlier, and that is that it's not just a service where you come on, you get your questions answered, and then that's it, masalama. But really, we're looking at the person that's coming on in a way that is more holistic. So one of the things to understand is that it's not just a matter of, that we have kind of a certain skill set and the answers to, let's say, every question you'll have. But a lot of times what it comes down to is the fact that when you look at, the people that are the mentors on this group, myself, Hamza, Yusuf, Dr. Uthman, you're looking at, over let's say 40 years of collective experience, right? And that actually says a lot. So from that perspective, what I'd like everyone to just understand is that these sessions we try to make them as holistic as possible. Sometimes it's not about the question that the person's even asking. And I'm sure, Yusuf, you can testify to this, that, you've probably been on a session every now and then, and the person's asking a question about a very specific area, but there's something else behind it, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of identified that just from, our experience and kind of how we perhaps may have dealt with these questions and so on and so forth. So it's a unique service. I mean, I've had some really, really fascinating conversations, and hopefully, was able to benefit the people that were able to come on, inshallah. But yeah, so I'm happy to be part of the team, and it's enjoying all the sessions so far, so good. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
May Allah accept.
I mean. So there's a little question here. We'll start getting involved with the chat. I think we've lost Brother Hamza because he was on the roof trying to get good signal, and it started to rain. And unfortunately, he didn't have his umbrella with him, so he's had to go on the run. But yeah, so we've got here. I'm not going to try to Jalal Beck. I won't try to pronounce that second name. So he's asking, do you have to be 18 to use the service? If you are underage, then if you can still use the service so long as you are accompanied by an adult or a guardian. So the question here is what's underage? Is it 18 or 16? We're still in the process of trying to figure that out. So we're just going to take the safer route at the moment. If you're under the age of 18, try to make sure that you come with a guardian who can be present with you, or at least to give us permission to speak with you. And then, inshallah, the service should still be open to you, because obviously the doubts creep in at all ages. You don't have to wait till 18 to start having to be dealing with shubahat. What I'll do as well is should we put the link out to let people on, or just engage with the chat?
Brothers, we can do both. If let's go ahead and put the link out. If there's someone that wants to join, I think that would be good as well.
Okay, inshallah.
And in the meantime, we can take some of the questions that they're posting on.
So I've added the StreamYard link to the live chat. So feel free to start jumping on, and we'll start bringing people on, inshallah. Hopefully, we'll be joined by Brother Hamza as well soon. So it says here, why the Ramadan live streams are no longer in the channel. Those videos were very informative. I'm guessing it's just because they were quite long. Maybe, inshallah, if there was informative stuff in there, we can try and look at sort of chopping them up and uploading them as separate videos, maybe.
I think some people have already done that on their own accord as well when they were up. So, I think the idea was some of them were like 4 hours, 5 hours. I mean, they were long. So I think the idea is to take some of the, the beneficial tidbits and maybe publish those, inshallah.
Yeah, I think it kind of makes the video section on the YouTube channel look a bit clunky as well. So you've got all these really nice videos, certain length, and then you've just got this random chunk there that's like 5-6 hours videos with very similar thumbnails.
I'm sure.
But so that's probably why. But inshallah, we'll look to trying to maybe getting some people to go through it and clipping out the interesting bits, maybe.
Yeah.
Other than that,
all right. Let's see, what else do we have?
Yeah, you can ask the questions here. And I've put the link out in the. I'll double check I've done it again. So we've not got anyone in the back yet. So if you want to jump on and ask any questions, you're welcome to do that as well, inshallah. There we go. So Eve's asked, if someone approaches us with the agnostic questions, but if we know that the root of the problem is her negative upbringing, how should we approach them? Should we even care about answering the questions? So, yeah, this is a brilliant question. So you don't want to be too dismissive. You don't want to be like, nah, I ain't got nothing to do with this. You've had a bad life. Like, that can maybe come across as a bit insensitive. So you want to, entertain the questions, because they can give rise to interesting conversations. So that you ask them, you be patient with them, respond with questions as well. Like, so what do you think? Is there any way that you could think of this in that way? Like, if they bring something like, oh, well, what are the chances of all of the religions being true? You say, well, is it not still conceivable that even though there might be multiple ideas of something, that one of them could still be true? Mm-hmm. You put them on their toes with, like, there's multiple interpretations of certain things within scientific interpretation of stuff. Does that mean that they're all false? No, of course not. So it's just a case of, you play the back and forth a little bit, and then you try to draw in or ask them questions about how they're doing. And if they're answering their own questions as well, you can say, are you sure this is about these questions or these particular problems, or is there something deeper at play here? And you can kind of leave it up to them to sort of lead them down that road, and then open it up for a conversation further on that. I think that's one way. How about you, Fahad? How would you?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm looking at the question now. If someone approaches us with agnostic questions, but if we know that the root of the problem is their negative upbringing, how should we approach them? Should we even care about answering the question? So negative upbringing is a really broad term. Like, what does that mean? Like, did they come from a broken household? Was it something else? And I'm gonna agree with Yusuf here, because a lot of times you don't want to just be dismissive and say, like, well, that's just a stupid question, right? Because maybe part of that negative upbringing, they've already faced people who have told them that their questions are not valid or valuable, right? So depending on what you mean by negative upbringing, identifying the problem may only come by way of sincerely engaging with the person's question. Now, that doesn't mean you have to answer the question directly, because sometimes you may want them to, hold their question in abeyance and think about the background before they get to the question, right? So yeah. I think the other day someone had a question about the height of Adam alayhi salam, one of the hadith. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of unravel there was, okay, we can get to the specific hadith, but why is this an issue for you? Like, why is this causing doubt, right? And so once you start to dig down and say, okay, well, what is the person's worldview? What is the lens by which they're looking at the world? How do you judge reality? And sometimes those foundational questions, once you start to unpack those for the person themselves as well, because a lot of times when we think about worldviews, when we think about a paradigm, very rarely do people, think that, okay, then I'm going to look at not only the question, or I need an answer to this question, but what are the tools by which I'm able to engage with the question? What are the epistemic tools? Like, what do I consider real knowledge, right? How do I evaluate reality, right? So those are questions that a lot of times people haven't really thought about, but you can use the question as a springboard for them to think in this broader way. And that's number one. Number two, it's always important to make sure that that you have a very a very merciful and cordial discussion with the person, right? You don't want to come off like I mentioned in the beginning, just kind of writing them off. And from that perspective, you can always, if you feel that their negative upbringing has put them in a position of, let's say, that they've got a very myopic view of the world, like this, it's just in my way or the highway, maybe you can even engage with them by asking them, hey, it's really important that you stand in the possibility that, X, Y, and Z could be true, right? And if you're willing to stand in that possibility, I'm not saying it's that you absolutely believe it, but just at least stand in the possibility that this may be true, and then we can have a fruitful discussion. And a lot of the best.
And there's another thing. So this idea that what the root of the problem is, as well. It's I think maybe a false assumption. So you might have an inclination, and it might very well be right, and it might even play a huge part of it.
Yeah.
But often problems can be multifaceted as well, so that there can be roots that split out into several different places. And although you might have hit the nail on the head by kind of addressing one of those problems, it doesn't mean it's the only thing that's going to resolve the problem. And so you may need to sort of chop a few things off to eventually get to the point where you're resolving the issues.
Yep.
So yeah, don't jump to the conclusion that these things are simple or linear. They can often be complex and multifaceted. That's one thing. And the second thing I would say is also answers don't always have to be absolute. So, it's the same thing with science. You've got something that you don't really know much about, and there's a huge gray area. There's a lack of sight into a particular area of something. The answer can often be raising several possibilities that you just leave it open with. Well, is this possible? Yeah, I guess it is possible, but so is this, and so is this. And insofar as these are possibilities, is that enough for the presence of this as a possibility to right or undermine the whole religion, simply as it being a possibility? Yep. In the same way that I like this example, so I use it quite a lot, but in the same way that, is it possible that the universe was created 5 minutes ago, along with all your memories and all the evidence of any history? Is that possible? Yeah, technically it is. But is that enough? The simple possibility of that being the case, is that enough to undermine all the evidence that suggests it started 14 odd billion years ago? Of course not. The presence of a particular possibility isn't sufficient in and of itself to undermine other things as well. So that's important to keep in mind when you're dealing with answering these questions and things like that. Just simply pointing out possibilities and addressing that as well often helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So someone's asked here, what do we need to put in the CV if we want to volunteer? A CV, just whatever you do with a normal CV. So it would be a case of inputting your work experience, what education you've received, if you've had any training in anything, a little personal statement, just explaining who you are, what you're about, anything that's relevant basically to applying for some work. Obviously it's a volunteer position, so it'd be unpaid, but you'd treat it in the same way you would do if you were applying for a job, because we're still taking this seriously, and we're only going to be taking serious candidates who genuinely want to do something, have the skills required in order to do that and be effective with it. And obviously they'll go through that whole process of being interviewed, etc. We'll talk to them and get to know them a bit, and if everything checks off, then we'll bring you onto the team, inshallah.
Yeah, just and perhaps the question is coming from the idea of the difference between like a job related CV versus a CV for an Islamic organization, right? So if you include information about both, that's fine as well. I mean, I think that's kind of see the complete picture of your background, right? So let's say if you're an accountant and you've worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers and Grant Thornton and whatever, and you've got that in your CV, fair enough. But that may not be just enough. So what we're also looking for is maybe some of the volunteer work you've done. Maybe you volunteered at your masjid. Put that in there. Maybe you've given a couple of talks, over a live stream. Put that in there as well. What are maybe if you studied with some mashayikh, that's always a good thing to put in there as well. Or you've you studied with certain people. All of that information, I wouldn't consider it superfluous. It just gives us more information about who you are as a person. Definitely. So you have your professional CV, but then of course you have the other stuff that that obviously we're going to be looking for related to a volunteer opportunity at Sapiens, right? Because at the end we are looking for someone that is going to be not only we're going to be looking for someone that has those kind of areas, interests, etc., that have to deal with Islam and volunteering and things like that. So
for example, if you've been engaged in dawah on Twitter, it might sound silly to put onto like a work CV, but it would be perfect for a CV volunteering for this. And then obviously with that, you can put your Twitter handle, we can have a look at the account, and we can do like a little background check in terms of, what you've got available there. And we'll be able to see, what kind of work you've been doing, how you approach dawah, etc., or how you approach helping people with doubts, and see how effective you've been, what kind, how the conversations generally flow. And obviously that's not just limited to Twitter. If you already have a YouTube channel, or if you're active in your local community in this regard, or if you go to dawah stalls, all of this is relevant information.
Yeah.
So put that in there, and I think inshallah, obviously, it'll really help in terms of having a look at it. So we've got some people in the back. We'll bring them on inshallah. So we have, what's your name? Mumtaz Mahmoud. Assalamu alaikum.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wa alaikum
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Yes.
Hope you guys are well.
Alhamdulillah.
So I got a question for you, if you guys don't mind.
Sure.
No, that's
So
fine.
I was talking to an atheist yesterday, and
Yep.
like we always do, we question their beliefs. Do you believe in a creator? All of that. And at the end, I didn't convince him, sadly. You know what I mean? That's what always happens. I didn't convince him that there is a creator. But then I asked him a very simple question. I told him, all right, bro, what if you're wrong? What if there is a judgment day? What if there is a law? What if there is hell or heaven? And when I asked him this question, he actually got triggered. Like, he got mad. He said, well, you
What if
shouldn't
there
ask that
isn't?
question.
Yeah, that's something. Usually, I get that. Well, what if there isn't? And it's like,
Yeah, I mean, but that's my point, Yusuf. Why do you think they get triggered? Why do you think they get mad? Like, when I asked him this question, I told him, listen, what if you're wrong about this? What if there is a judgment day and you're gonna burn in hell for eternity? You're making a huge gamble. And he didn't have an answer for me, and he actually got triggered, and he left the conversation, which is fine. Like,
yeah, no, it's a good question. Obviously, they don't all get absolutely triggered, but when they do, sort of makes you think, doesn't it? Like, why would that question in and of itself make you so angry, bro? Like,
yeah,
like what's wrong?
Yeah.
So that, like, what if a hell exists? Like, if you don't believe in it, what's wrong with just saying, well, then I'll deal with it? But I guess obviously having to just deal with it is not a very nice thought, because
Yeah.
the whole point of it is that hell's quite an uncomfortable experience.
And you're gonna do it for eternity, like
Yeah.
forever, you know?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's, I guess, just trying to, again, you've just got to be careful sometimes with this, because, like, was this on social media or was this face to face?
Yeah, social media, just a normal combo. Yeah,
Like a text writing?
yeah, just texting. Yeah,
Yeah, sometimes as well. So when I used to work in a call center, and one of the things they sort of emphasized when they were training us was like, listen, most of communication involves visual triggers. So like you can see the expression on someone's face. This really, really affects how people perceive how the conversation happens. And you know, like your hand movements, like how twitchy you are, all of this sort of really tells a person a lot about what's going on in your head and what it is you mean when you're trying to communicate these things, etc. Now, obviously, when it comes to talking over the phone, this drops, and the percentage is really high. They said like 90% of, or 80 very high percent basically, of all communication is visual. So when you're talking to people on the phone, you've got to try to make up with that, with what you have available. So, for example, your tone of voice, the words that you're using, you know, like making emphasis on certain things a bit more, like, you know, using polite words, not using things like basically, or, you know, like things that may come across as patronizing. And then
beautiful
when you drop it,
beautiful answer.
and then when you drop it even more, you drop it to text, Twitter, you've got even more of an impediment. And so, and we've really got to, and I think I fall into this as well. So I think it's common. I think it's innate with trying to engage with people on social media like Twitter, etc. We've got to keep in mind that like we've lost so much of our
very true,
ability to communicate. And just one word, if you like, you write a sentence, you've got to keep in mind when they read it with a voice in their head. Now, if they've already got an impression of you as like an angry this or an angry that, you know, like the typical media and
they always
image
got
of a
that
Muslim
like beforehand. They always got that beforehand,
and you have to combat that. You have to combat that. And so, like I say, this is me giving myself advice as much as it is you. But we have to try to sort of get rid of the image that they have and get rid of that angry Muslim voice that's in their head when they read these, like, oh, you're an idiot, this, that, and the other. Like, that needs to be calmed down, and then you need to build a more positive voice in their head, basically. And then that might, inshallah, improve the conversation a bit, because it might just have come across condescending. It might not necessarily have been anything about. It's not to say you're a condescending person. You sound very polite, but these are just assumptions that people make when you're having these conversations, and sometimes it gets the better.
Especially atheists. Those assumptions especially comes from atheists, not from anybody else. I would say atheists or like number one on the line.
Well, it's mainly because they already are sort of rejecting this idea of an afterlife, or at least like refusing to believe it. And then obviously, if you're having this conversation with Christians, that what if you're wrong thing? What if there is a hellfire? They already.
I've actually stopped debating Christians because I think it's pointless. Like I just watch Hamza, on AF Dawah and Hamza's Den, and I just watch him. But to me, like debating Christians is just pointless, because they never believe, no matter how much evidence and corruption.
I was a Christian, bro. I was a Christian.
I would have to say.
But you're different, bro. You're a beautiful soul.
Disagree with that.
I mean, that's
how many. See, the thing is, and this is really, you brought up something really important, and that is, remember that we, and I'm not saying that that this is what you're saying, but I'm just saying in general, sometimes when we get in the midst of a debate or a conversation, we may think like, look, man, this person, like, they're never going to, they're never going to capitulate. Yeah, they're never going to capitulate to my argument. They're not going to. They're not really going to agree with what I'm saying. And the reality is there are so many factors that we just don't have access to in terms of their personality, their background. I mean, just this very example of the atheist, like, those preconceived notions, became manifest right when you started to press some buttons, right? And so the guy started getting a bit upset and then finally just clicked off. Those are certain things that had you perhaps had the information, maybe you would have dealt with it a bit differently, right? Obviously, like Yusuf mentioned, there's certain things that you have to, compensate for when you're doing like a chat. But at the end of the day, the thing to always keep in mind is that the person you're speaking to, like, them capitulating to your argument is not the goal. Right? The goal is never to say, okay, well, I've got to be able to debate this person so that they will clearly understand the truth of Islam. The reality is that person understanding the truth of Islam, you can convey information, but all of that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And that guidance, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like, you don't guide whom you love, right? وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ. But Allah is the one who guides who He chooses. And so whether they're Christian or atheist or whatever, I look at them as the same, right? That, look, I'm going to give them some information, and then I'm going to make dua for that person. And then
I'm going to leave him to reflect what I'm saying, basically.
Yeah, and of course, don't forget the power of dua. Like, if sometimes it's a matter of self-reflection as well. Like, why am I doing this? From our perspective, from the da'iyah, because when we're in the middle of a conversation, and this has happened to me so many times, you could stray into an area where you start, instead of calling towards the truth and calling towards Allah, you start calling towards myself and winning the argument. Now, again, I'm not saying that's you, but it happens. We're human beings. So in order to combat that, it's important that you're always thinking about the well-being of the person, and you make dua for the person. And in that dua, you never know. I can tell you some of the craziest stories about people that I thought would never become Muslim. Never, right? And this person, subhanallah, like, there was this one time we were at, and I told this on one of the live streams, but I used to work at a certain place in downtown Baltimore, and there was a student group there, and they would do these Jummah khutbahs, and one day, in the Jummah khutbahs, they would either be really good or really terrible. And so one day a non-Muslim came in and he said, like, I want to attend your Jummah, right? So we're okay. So he's sitting in the back. My friend is the one who brought him to the khutbah. And this khutbah, I can tell you, it was the worst khutbah of my life. I've never heard a khutbah this bad. The guy was talking about istinja and like the fiqh of going to the bathroom. And I'm just like, Subhanallah. So, and I'm thinking, this guy sitting in the back, what must he be thinking about Islam? Talking about using your left hand and, cleaning and, and fecal matter and all. I'm just like, why? I mean, can you imagine, right? And so I go up to him afterwards, and I'm thinking this guy's going to be like, okay, thank you, but no thank you. So I asked him, I said, so what brought you to...
Thank you. No Islam for me. No Islam
that's
for
what
me.
I'm thinking. Like, who would accept Islam when they're talking about, right hand versus left hand, the bathroom, the etiquette, sitting, standing, So I go up to him and I say, like, what brought you to Jummah? And he said, I've been looking into Islam a little bit, And I just asked him. I just said, you know what? Let's just try it. I said, is there anything that you don't like about Islam? Now, after that khutbah, I'm thinking he's going to tell me, did you not hear the khutbah? Right? Like, didn't you just hear what was said? So he says, no, there's nothing. I actually really like everything about Islam. And I said, so is there any reason you wouldn't want to become Muslim? He's like, no. And he took his shahada. So Allahu Akbar. And so don't let any sort of attitude, any sort of look, don't let anything become an impediment for you calling people to Islam. It doesn't matter if they're Christian, if they're Jew, if they're atheist, if they have, tattoos all up and down their face. I don't really care. Because the way I look at it...
I think Yusuf knows who I'm basically talking about. His name is Terry. He always comes on Hamza's channel. And this
Terry.
guy, like, he made me lose hope in actually convincing Christians in the truth. Seriously, this guy,
never lose hope. Look...
And Yusuf know who I'm basically talking about. I think he knows him.
I will say, even the person that you may think is the most difficult, you don't know, right? 5 years down the line, Terry could be on this live stream.
No way, I don't see that happening.
Allah knows best, bro. Honestly,
Allah knows, man.
Maybe and the thing is some of these things are not instant. Sometimes like if you want fruit, you plant a seed, you gotta wait a bit. You can't start eating oranges straight away. And like maybe had you met me when I was young, you might have said the same thing. Maybe you'd have met cocky teenage me.
If it was the case for Umar ibn Khattab, when Umar ibn Khattab first, when you saw,
such a good example. Yeah, you're
right.
right.
When people saw him, he was someone radiallahu anhu, who would torture Muslims. He was someone, and one of the Muslims, when they were leaving Mecca, and he said, "Has it come down to this, and that you have to leave?" And so this Sahabiya, she said, "Yes, you've made it so bad for us that we have to migrate." And so seeing this softness, her husband sees her and says, "It seems like you think that that Umar will become Muslim." And she says, "Yeah, because he expressed this softness." He says, "Let me tell you something. The donkey of his father will become Muslim before he becomes Muslim."
And you know what's funny? Umar was such a stubborn person.
Yeah.
Umar ibn Khattab, who was extremely stubborn. So for him to convert to Islam, that is such a beautiful example that you just mentioned. And listen, I don't want to take a lot of time. Like, you guys, thank you for this amazing conversation. You guys are extremely smart and intelligent. Thank you very much for this amazing opportunity. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
All right.
Nice.
We have someone next.
So the next is Saif Ghayaf. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Salam wa rahmatullah.
How you doing?
First of all, excuse my accent and vocab and grammar because I'm not a native English speaker.
No worries, inshallah. Bismillah,
Okay.
go ahead.
So there's a question that I was having from a long time, almost 2 years. When we think about ikhlas, sincerity, in a certain deed, a good deed, we cannot be sure that it's accepted, any certain deed that we do, because there are certain aspects that makes us not certain. But when I think about it, if I do as much as I can in sincerity and ittiba' al-Rasul, following the Prophet, as much as I can, so I know myself I cannot do more than this. So why can I not be sure that it's accepted? Because I cannot do more than this. So
Sure. So Jazakallah khair. It's an excellent question. And it really shows that your heart is in the right place. So I must start by saying that, inshallah, and may Allah accept it from you. So one of the things is that we have to understand that, let's take the example is if you were sure that the deed was accepted. Let's say you were sure 100% it was accepted. So what kind of impact would that have on your worship of Allah, right? Usually as human beings, what happens is when you know you've got something, then you just relax. You stop, right?
Yes.
So there is a deeper hikmah in us not being sure, right? And so that we continue to struggle. And Allahu A'lam, I mean, obviously there's many hikmah, there's many wisdoms behind, why this is the case. But one of them is that if you were to know, then one of the things is then perhaps you would stop that struggle and that worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So Allah has hidden that with a deeper wisdom to make sure that you continue on that path. Because look, and this is something that sometimes, I speak to Christians about. I say, if you know you're going to paradise, because sometimes they'll give this shubha, they'll give this doubt and say, we're guaranteed paradise, you're not. Okay? And I say, if you're guaranteed paradise, then why do you bother doing anything, right? Why are you even alive? Like if you knew Jannah was guaranteed for you, then why are you dealing with all of these, the vicissitudes of life, the ups and downs of life, your flat tire, your family, the divorce and marriage and this and that and all these other things? Khalas, just go straight to paradise, like finish it off, right? And that's a bit harsh. But the reality is that it is because we understand this deeper purpose, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hides these things from us so that we continue on the path, right? It's very much like, I was talking to a brother today, and he said that, after Ramadan, my iman goes down. And I want my iman to be the same throughout the entire year. And I said, if your iman was the same the entire year, then how would you constantly want to go further and further? So Allah in his wisdom, makes certain times more blessed than other times. Because as human beings, we need to have these ups and downs to be able to strive and struggle more, so we can reach higher goals, right? Because Allah wants to see the best in his creation, right? And we can only reach the best when we're constantly striving, right? Wallahu ta'ala alam. I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Yusuf, but you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
me.
thank you very
So-
much.
No,
Can I
I've
ask
got
another?
something to add to it as well. So the issue with that is we don't have sight into the future. So just as like when I was a non-Muslim, I didn't foresee me becoming a Muslim. If anything, I just never ever saw myself being one. It just felt like such a foreign idea to me. In the same way, people can be very confident and very sure of themselves in the deen, but Allah knows best what's going to happen. There's the story of, I can't remember the exact details of it, but there was a wise man who everyone considered pious, and everyone saw how, mashallah, look at him, he's worshipping all the time, like he just sort of secludes himself. And then in the end of his life, like a number of events occurred one after the other, and then he ended up getting thrown in the hellfire as a result, or consequences of his actively proclaiming disbelief. And that was not too long before his the end of his life. So and if we, a'udhu billah, may Allah protect us from ever being that, and may we die in a state of belief. But this is the thing. So if you've done all of these good deeds, and then in the end you throw it all out the window, you commit injustice one after the other, trying to hide the first injustice, and then openly proclaim disbelief, then how misplaced was that certainty in the first place? So we can't be certain. Allah knows what is in store for us in the future, and we do our best to collect as many good deeds as we possibly can, now and going on into the future. And may Allah forgive our shortcomings and make us die in a state of belief. So I would say that's one of the biggest reasons why we shouldn't be too confident. And
Okay.
You had a follow-up question. You said there was a second.
Yeah,
question
just
you had?
it's a bit philosophical. So we use our intellect to use evidence to like prove God or like Islam. So like the intellect tells us that no contradictions, the causality, these things. Okay, what? How can we prove intellect? Now I heard like almost every answer. So you cannot prove it because you'll use it. You're like you're using your intellect to prove it. So this is you cannot do this.
So
Is it like
no, it's a good question. It's one of them foundational problems. Now,
yeah?
All we can really say is there's a number of possibilities. It's something that just sort of developed randomly, or B, it was something developed with some sort of wisdom behind it, or C, it was, I guess that C would be, or the third one would be equivalent to the second one. Now, if God has given us these capacities, or the thing that made us has instilled us with the ability to reason for the purpose of seeking Him, then we could be comfortable in the fact that these are sound faculties. Now, that's obviously in one of them grey area questions. Like, can we know that for certain? Allahu Alam. There's probably a lot of argumentation around it, but it's a wavy one. Now, on the other hand, say you take the atheist position, and you say that it's something that developed or evolved at the behest of sort of these random developments over time. You've got this sort of double-edged sword where you've got to ask one of two questions. Is that faculty the result of a process that inclines towards truth, or simply being able to survive? Now, if the question is that it's only bothered with survival, then you can foresee the development of this faculty based on principles that don't incline towards truth. So, the idea Brother Hamza gives, I think, is the mushroom. So you can believe all mushrooms are bad. That will give an increase to the probability that your species will survive. But it doesn't mean that your faculties are developing based on this theory of truth, or an inclination or a desire for truth. That does the job. And there's the good example with the jewel beetle in Australia that developed a particular methodology in order to find a mate. Now, the jewel beetle is a large, brown, shiny beetle, and many of its features happen to be very similar to brown beer bottles. And when the Australians sort of started to inhabit that place and develop a liking for beverages that come in brown beer bottles, they used to throw them away. And the jewel beetle would see these and mistake them as a potential mate. And then they would engage in a mating process with the brown bottles to the point of exhaustion, and it would kill them. And they would die in the heat, obviously, because it's quite hot out in the desert in Australia. And it risked leading them to destruction. They nearly became extinct as a result of this faculty that had developed over time and was not inclined towards truth. It was inclined towards shortcuts, inclined towards giving them a particular ability to try to find a certain thing, not based on whether or not it is actually the thing that they're looking for, but based on its ability to seek particular qualities, and that nearly killed it. So now, if that's the case, then if you're an atheist, you can't even really trust your own faculties either. You can't trust the faculty in order to be able to judge or critique things. And how do we know that any of this is genuine? How do we justify reason? And if reason is something that evolved, then that by definition means it's something that changed. If it evolved with us, it went through a process of change with us. And what was reason however many million years ago is not what reason is now, and it'll continue to develop and change. That's what evolution is. It's this changing process. So then how can you refer to reason or to logic as something timeless without making it transcendental in some way, without moving it to the metaphysical? If you're rooting it in the material world and you're saying that it follows this process of change with us, then you've got a problem then. Like, well, what do we do with reason here? And then on top of that, let's say they say, no, it is based in truth. Increased survivability is followed by the species being more inclined towards truth. Well, then you've got the issue here of, well, the most successful species on the planet, or at least one of them, is a religious creature. So what are you going to say about that now? Like, what? It happens that we have developed to incline towards truth to the point where it increases our survivability. But one of the biggest lies that's ever hit the face of the planet is the thing that's allowed the human being to be one of the most successful species on the planet. Like it's able to dominate anywhere that it goes. It literally covers the entire surface of the earth, pretty much, and it's able to completely change the environment as well. So it goes to somewhere, and if you look at a city does not resemble anything that used to be there prior to that city's existence. We've moved and shifted materials from all over the planet in order for these things to sprout out of that ground. That's something no species has ever done before. Now, can you really equate all of that to this random process that doesn't incline necessarily towards truth? That's a big jump, that, I think, to make a bit of an issue. And so you've got the issue either it is something that inclines us towards truth, in which case you've got to contend with the serious problem of explaining how being a religious species has helped us to survive in the general sense, believing in an afterlife, believing in a higher power, something transcendental, in the supernatural, etc. Or on the other hand, you say, no, the process of these rational capacities developing or capabilities developing is the process of something blind that doesn't direct itself towards truth at all, but towards a higher likeliness of survivability in and of itself. And in which case, how are you at that point even coming up with these ideas? How are you able to like articulate yourself in such a way and then go about criticizing religions in particular ways as well? Like, this process becomes difficult under the assumption that that's how these rational capacities developed. The ideas of logic, etc. In order for any of this to sort of make sense, there has to be some sort of transcendental or metaphysical relation between what we're referring to as logic and reason with the human being and its ability to manipulate the world the way it does. I don't think you can push it towards this idea of just sort of random development. I think there's a good argument to be made that the existence of these faculties lead towards the idea that there is a God that instilled us in them.
So let me just ask, did that kind of cover what you were asking, or were you asking something else from like the Islamic framework?
No, maybe from a different angle. Like I was asking, we like keep on saying, what's the proof of this? What's the proof of this?
Okay.
Until we go to the top.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
That's what I figured. So it's your question is interesting, and it's been a philosophical conundrum for quite some time, right?
Yeah.
It's taken different forms. One is what's known as the Monkeyson's Trilemma, right? That, can you reason everything? Can reason answer, can you answer every single question? Because one of the things about reason, like you mentioned, is that if you say, I can prove this, let's say X, then you can say, well, what's the proof of X? Well, it's Y. What's the proof of Y? And then you have to go to infinity, right? And, so Monkeyson's Trilemma says that either you're going to go to infinity, or you're going to say something is just because it is, right? So it's just circular. It's just because I said so, or because it is. There's no really sort of reason for it. Or the thing is that you have to leave it alone. So the point is that in order to kind of break this trilemma, we have to understand that there are, even within the world of philosophy, what we call first principles or axioms. In other words, these are things that you cannot prove, but you must assume that are true, right? Otherwise, the entire system breaks down. Okay, so like you mentioned, you can't ask why forever. Because if you're just using your rationale, then you're going to ask why, and you're going to keep on going. And at a certain point, like you can't keep going. You can't go on forever. So there has to be a stopping point, Now, when I look at rationality, I say people usually divide rationality into two sections. They say, number one, you have rationality, and then you have things that are irrational. But I said, in fact, you have three categories of rationality. One, you have, things that are rational, like a rational statement, I am Fahad. You have other things that are irrational. So if I said, I'm a married bachelor, right? That is an irrational statement. But then you have things that are outside of rationality, what you call supra-rational, right? And those are things that if it wasn't for, that if you didn't have those, the entirety of rationality would fall. In other words, it would collapse, okay? So what are those things? Things like logical principles. Logical principles are part of the supra-rational. So going back to what I said about being a married bachelor, I could say, I'm a married bachelor, and you say, well, that's not logical. And I would say, well, why is it not logical? You said, well, because it goes against mutual exclusivity. You cannot have two opposite things exist at the same time. And then I say, prove to me that principle. Well, you can't prove the principle. You start with the principle and then you move forward. So logical principles are those things that fall within the super-rational. Okay? Are you with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. From the Islamic point of view, the Islamic worldview, the super-rational, that's what we may call the fitra.
Fitra. Yeah.
Right. So what we say is that no one can say that I'm only going to prove things rationally. You have to have something outside of rationality. From the Islamic worldview, we say that is our natural, primordial, base state that Allah created all human beings on, right? Fitrat Allahi allati fatara nas alayha. That it is the fitra that Allah created, everything upon, right? All the human beings upon. Now, this fitra, what's within the fitra? Logical principles, those, axiomatic truths. Other things in the part of the fitra. Your sense of beauty. When you go and you see a sunset, and you recognize that as beautiful, that is not a rational issue, right? No one's like, I always give the example. I said, imagine you go with your wife and you say, wow, look at that beautiful sunset. And she says, that is the ugliest thing I've ever seen. Prove to me rationally that is a beautiful sunset, right? It's not a rational question, but it's something that you recognize very clearly and you know it, right? Similarly, you have certain types of smells. If you walk into a room and you say, okay, it smells terrible, and someone says, no, it smells great, there's no rational issue here, right? This is an immediate recognition.
Yeah.
So all of these things form what is known as part of the fitra. And the fitra has a different dynamic than just pure rationality. And this is why when we talk about this idea of reaching a state of yaqeen, a state of certainty, reaching a state of certainty is not only based on rationality. There must be a spiritual component to that as well. All right. And so from our perspective, we say that one of the greatest spiritual components is an engagement with the Quran. Why? Because the Quran does not work like human beings work, in the sense that you will not go through the Quran and find discursive reasoning, right? So as humans, we make things like syllogisms, right? A, B, therefore C, and so on and so forth. The Quran, it makes arguments, but it makes arguments with the entirety of the human being. Aql and fitra. In other words, rationality and the fitra. And so a lot of the arguments you find in the Quran, in fact, are not at the rational level, but the one that's above the rational level, the supra-rational, the fitra.
Yeah.
In fact, the very term ayah, people say it's a sign, right? That's how it's interpreted, right? It's an ayah for something. The term ayah comes from the trilateral alif, ya. And so you can get other terms from that, like the term ayu, like when you want to distinguish something. Ayu a'mal afdal. Which of these deeds is the best? So you have a whole bunch of deeds and you have one that's distinguished, okay? So when we look at what is the function of ayat, we see that an ayah has a certain dynamic. Number one, an ayah is something where there's no information transfer or a learning process for you to recognize the ayah. All right, and I'll explain that in a second. Number two, it's not time bound. In other words, it happens immediately. Okay, so let's take an example. and I give this example all the time. Let's say I graduated from a university, Michigan State, and 10 years later, I'm unpacking my clothes and I find my gown. Now, immediately when I see my gown, I'm taken back 10 years to the day I graduated, the look on my parents' face, the fact that I walked up on stage, all those come back immediately. Now, did I learn something new at that moment? No. But what it has to do is something that's already inside myself. Now, that which is inside yourself, you may have spent some time reflecting upon it. You've done tadabbur upon it. But what an ayah does, it brings that thing that is dormant within the human being to the surface. And therefore you recognize it. And that's one of the main, that is the function of the Quran. And that's why we say the Quran is multifaceted. It has rational arguments, sure, right? But it also has a certain linguistic structure, which a person can recognize its beauty. It has a certain ability to point towards things in the natural world. When you see a large waterfall, you have a feeling, what they call in English, awe. So you look at it, it's beautiful, and yet you're a bit scared, right?
Yeah.
So that idea of awe, it's kind of like, it's how do you rationally explain that, right? But yet you experience it. So your experience of awe is very real. And so just kind of summarize now, the intellect can take you up to a certain point. And we're not people who say, we only deal with experience and we flush intellect out of the door, right? We just throw it away. Rather, we say, yes, we have our intellect, but we also have the fitrah, and that uncovering of the fitrah, or to bring that fitrah to the fore, happens by way of rational arguments, by way of reflecting upon nature, by doing certain spiritual acts. Ramadan is an example of that. When you're fasting and things like that, it brings us to a higher state of iman and a higher state of realization. Many of us, some of us maybe not, but so instead of us being in this, I call this, when we're talking about non-Muslims, I call this an epistemic lizard's hole, right? That we limit ourselves to only rationality. We have to understand we use rationality and we understand the fitrah. And so our way to reach yaqeen, or to reach certainty, is by way of rationality and by way of spirituality. And Allah knows best. Did that answer your question, or did I completely overshoot your question and you asked about something completely different?
That's the area of my question.
Jazakallah khair.
Thank you.
All right, Yusuf, you're muted.
Yeah,
man.
no, I keep doing it. There's a really good article on the Sapiens Institute website written by Jamie Taylor, which talks on this idea of basic beliefs.
Yeah.
This probably, I think, going to answer a few of your questions as well. So I do recommend checking that out. It's to do with, if you just search Jamie Turner basic beliefs, the Sapiens Institute, that should probably, inshallah, give rise to it. But if alternatively, go to sapiensinstitute.org, go to essays, scroll down, eventually you'll come across it. I think it's one of the first ones.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Jazakallah khair for joining us. Barakallah feek. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
All right, Yusuf, I've got to run, man. I'm already late to pick
you're
up my
leaving
son.
me alone. I'll message some bros. I'll see if I can get some back.
No. I think Hamza said he's supposed to come on in a little bit, so he's just trying to struggle with his internet connection. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless everyone here and accept from everyone. If you guys are still on when I come back, I'll try to jump back on, inshallah. But may Allah accept from you as well, Yusuf, and please keep us in your du'as. And so I'll see you guys later, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Jazakallah khair for joining us. So I'm a one-man band now, inshallah. Let's have a look at the I've messaged some of the lads from Thought Adventure podcast. I'll see if I can get them to join me. And inshallah, you might be able to get a bit more of a variance of opinion or answers. And so I'll just have a look at the chat for a moment while I wait to see if any of them will respond to me. So we've got here Falak asking, will there only be one meeting or more? So you can book one at a time. I think if you book too many, it sort of gets flagged as spam. So don't book too many, book one. And once that session is finished, you're more than welcome to go and book another session in, as often or as little as you want. Obviously availability standing. So yeah, the feature is there, and it's free for you to use, so you can utilize that as many times as you like, inshallah. So Silk Song Dates has said, isn't it odd that this idea was never done before? Sometimes it's just a case of waiting, they pop up. You never know, this might sort of set something off, and inshallah there might be more features like this popping up. Don't worry guys, in the back I will attend to you as well. I just don't want to neglect the comments, so if you bear with me, and I'll pull you up in a second. So someone's asked here, guys, if someone told me, what if the necessary being created? Mashallah, I think you're also the brother in the back. That's next. I'll bring you up. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Wa alaikum salam. I can hear you. How you doing, brother?
Excuse me if my accent isn't that good, because English is not my mother tongue. I'm Spanish. I'm from Spain.
Oh, mashallah.
So I got this question. I was talking to a friend of mine. We were talking about the Kalam cosmological argument, and he was like, "Yeah, okay, but what if this entity created the universe and died?" And I was like, "I know it's kind of sketchy, kind of weird, but I really."
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I really didn't knew how to respond to this question. So my question to you, Yusuf, is how would you respond to this kind of contention, if you would like to call it that way?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. It's really simple to answer. So basically you just repeat back to them, well, what do we mean by necessary? Necessary means to exist by necessity. That is,
it couldn't be any other way.
Yeah. So its non-existence is impossible. If it could die, it's not a necessary being. If it dies, it's a contingent being.
But
it's dependent.
That's like, I guess that's the contingency argument, right?
So yeah, it's the word contingency is just referring to basically this having particular attributes or qualities. Now, necessary existence means that it exists necessarily. Contingent existence means it's a possible existence. So a contingent thing can exist, but it can also not exist. Me and you are contingent things. Yeah, we were born. We didn't exist prior to our birth, and we'll die. Our bodies will cease to exist, and they'll turn into dust, etc. It's the same with anything. This as a contingent existence. Everything that comes into being and goes out of being is a contingent existence. Now, if you've sort of gone through the process of arguing and demonstrating the existence of something necessary, and they've agreed to the points that you've made as you've gone down them, then at that point, if they've agreed to it, this option isn't open to them. They can't say, well, what if that necessary being died? Well, it can't die. Because
the argument was put in this way, like, the universe was created and necessarily was created by something uncreated. And he was like, but what if that entity created the universe and then died?
Yeah, so basically what we're doing when we're arguing for a necessary existence is we're arguing that that which everything relies upon is itself independent and necessary. It doesn't rely upon anything else for its existence. It's self-sufficient, and it exists on its own. And if you're trying to, once you've established that, if you move on from there to then trying to ask questions about whether or not it could die, the simple answer is, well, no, it's not, because dying is only available to contingent beings. That their existence is possible, and so dying is an option. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. I got one more question regarding these cosmological arguments, and it's like, and the question is, how would you respond to someone claiming that the universe is infinite, is eternal in time, that had no beginning and will have no end?
Yeah, so there's a number of arguments that sort of go against the possibility of an infinite regress. And so you could utilize them. I'm sure you're probably familiar with them. But they generally go down the line that an infinite. I'm just going to mute your mic because there's a bit of interference.
Yeah, it's kind of.
Sorry. So basically an infinite amount of time can never end. And if an infinite amount of time can't end, because that's the whole point of an infinite, like there's a never-ending amount of time. If an infinite amount of time cannot end, then the present moment would never have arisen. Because now is the end of an infinite timeline. But the whole point of an infinite is that it's never, you can't end it. And if there is an end, then it's not an infinite timeline, it's a finite timeline. And so this idea of like an infinite timeline at all, like, and that's one example. There's quite a few. I recommend checking them out. If you just search the impossibility of an infinite regress, you'll come up with plenty of articles and videos that talk about this. Well, basically, there's an argument that says that, for example, if I owe you £5 and I say I'll give it you back after an infinite amount of time, would you ever get that £5 back? No, because if I'm telling you that you're going to get that after an infinite amount of time, that time's never going to arise. Because whenever there's a moment, it's like, well, can you add another moment onto that? Yes, you can. All right, well, now that moment's right. Can you add another moment onto that? Yes, you can. And so you keep doing that forever and ever and ever and ever. Then that moment of me giving you the money back never arrives. And so you can't have this infinite regress. You can't have the moment where something is to happen or something's going to occur on a timeline that's never ending. Now, there's personally, I don't think you even need to go down the route of having that argument either. I prefer discussing things about the argument from dependency. So you talk about the existence of dependent things, and you say, well, the set of all dependent things must be dependent upon something outside of that set. And you can't, with this, it doesn't matter whether that set is infinite or not. So there could be 10 dependent things, there could be 20, there could be a never-ending line of dependent things, if you want to say that. And ignore the arguments, or you're not convinced by the arguments of an infinite regress. It doesn't matter. In any case, a collection of dependent things must still be dependent on something outside of that collection itself. There can't be a circular dependency, because that requires the existence of something prior to the thing that it's dependent upon. But if it's like, say you've got A dependent on B, dependent on C. Oh no, we won't complicate it. We say A is dependent on B, but it's a circular dependency. And so A is dependent on B, but B is dependent on A as well. I don't know, it's a better way of sort of writing it. I'll pull up a banner. So A dependent on B, dependent on A, dependent on B. So if A is dependent on B, but B is dependent on A, what that means is A needs to exist prior to B in order for A to be in existence. But it can't, because, if B is dependent on A, it needs it as well. And so you end up with this problem. It's like, in order for you to exist, your mother has to have given birth to you, but in order, you're your mother's father, and in order for her to have existed, you need to already have been there in order for her to be able to have given birth to you. That you end up in these absurdities where it's like, how are you going to try to explain things like that? Basically, what you end up doing is saying, well, the set, there can't be no circular relationship between all these dependent things. They are all dependent. They must rely upon something external to them. And if it's outside of that set, it can't have the same quality of being dependent, because if it was, it would be inside of the set. And so the principle of sufficient reason, if you have a set of things, all of which require an explanation that's beyond them, then you have to basically allow for the existence of something independent, something unique, that has an attribute that none of the set of dependent contingent things has. That is independence, independent existence. And then obviously you've got separate arguments for other qualities of that. There's a good episode that we did on the Thought Adventure podcast. None of the brothers have joined us, unfortunately. So, but if you check that out as well, there's some episodes on stage 1 of the Kalam. So it's arguing for the necessary existence. And then after that, there's a stage 2 of the Kalam as well, which goes from arguing what the necessary existence is to the argument that this necessary existence is a God, or that it has attributes that we would otherwise associate with God. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really followed that podcast. I guess it's with Abdul, Jake, the Muslim metaphysician, I guess, and
Sharif, yeah,
some other guy. I can't
Sharif.
remember. Really, subhanAllah, I just watched it today with that guy Aaron Rad that just got trapped, and he was like, no, philosophy is not my field. But subhanAllah is that guy Justin from the EA show. I guess that that guy reversed to Islam. Am I right? Yeah. So yeah, it's a great podcast. So underrated. And guys, I really love the job that you're doing, and I hope that you create more content in Spanish, because alhamdulillah I can speak English, but here in Spain there's a large community of Muslims that don't really know the basics of Islam, don't know like basic things like what is Sharia, what is that the Quran is eternal, it's not something that was created. So I guess that inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah, we are making content in Spanish on Sapiens. We have a sheikh who's with us who is a Spanish speaking, so he's going to be focusing on that, inshallah, and hopefully as well we can try to expand that, so we can expand the dawah into Spain. So it is an aim, inshallah. We'll get there, and we'll see how it develops in terms of when it grows. But other than that, Jazakallah khair, Ali, for your questions. They were very interesting. May Allah bless you, and we'll see you again, hopefully, inshallah.
Ameen. Thank you very much, guys. Assalamu alaikum.
Barakallahu feek. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Okay, let's have a look at the comment section. See if we can find some more questions. 1 second. I'm trying to convince the brothers from TAP to join me now. I'll just send them the link. All right, let's have a look. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll try to go back and forth from the live chat to the people in the back. So those of you who are waiting to jump on and ask your questions, be patient, and inshallah I will bring you on. Let's have a look. There's a lot of salam alaikum, so wa alaikum salam to everyone who's passing their salams. Let's have a look at this. It says, do new da'is get included? But that would be good for knowledgeable people out there who don't have a platform. Right, so I'm guessing you mean with regards to the CV question. So if you're new to doing dawah, but you're knowledgeable in terms of like you've got a good knowledge base, then put that into your CV. Where you've got your information from, how well you've been doing in your studies and things like that. All of this information is fine. If you've not had previous experience doing dawah, we can organize or arrange for you to have dawah training. There are multiple platforms available online. IORA have a really good one, which basically go take you through the steps of giving dawah. And yeah, so like if you haven't had that particular experience, you might not necessarily get onto, say, for example, the Lighthouse project straight away. There may be other roles available for you. But yeah, like I said, just if you've got any experience at all, or if you've just got the will at least to want to help, fill in that volunteer form and see if you can offer something to us that may be of use. You never know that the particular skill set you have might be one that we need desperately. Let's see what else there is. What time is it as well? So I'll stay on for another 40 minutes, inshallah. And then I will need to go because I do need to pray at some point. Maghrib. Does anyone need... yeah, it would help. There's no point utilizing it if you don't need it. And if you don't need it, that's pretty much synonymous with saying that you've not got like a specific objective. Like, you know, if you're just filling in the form, for example, and you pick a day and it's like, well, why do you want to do the surface? It's like, oh, no reason. I don't have any particular doubts. I'm not struggling with anything. Then there's no point utilizing the service. The service is specifically there to help people deal with doubts, to help people maybe that have already left Islam and thinking or wanting to get back, or like to kind of overcome certain issues. It's also available there for people engaged in dawah or mentoring or leading communities and things like that, and they want extra help or training in order of thinking of certain strategies or battle plans in order to make things happen. You know, it's there if you've got a particular objective, whether that be the relief of a doubt, answering of particular questions, or of trying to get more information on how to do better with your own work. That's what it's for. If you don't have anything, then there's no point using it. And if anything, it would sort of be wrong to do this because the service is specifically for people who do need the help. And if you make an appointment and you don't need the help, then you're taking that space away from someone who does. So we've got limited means at the moment. We only have so many du'ats, so many hours slots. And we are already sort of overflowing, which is why we need to expand. It's why we need more volunteers who are good at the dawah and maybe who have some spare time to be able to help us and answering objections and dealing with doubts, etc. And then obviously as we get more volunteers on, the slots will increase, and so there'll be more availability. But you know, even then, as Hamza said earlier, we've got people booked into like the end of this year, some early next year. So keep that in mind. You know, use the service when you need it. Don't use it when you don't. It's like, would you go to the doctors? You know, even if you feel healthy, you feel happy, you know, you've got everything in your life going smoothly, you've got a healthy diet. If you don't need to go there or to the hospital, you know, if you don't need to go to the hospital, why bother going? It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, just keep that in mind, inshallah. All right, let's bring someone on. So we've got Ayan. Assalamu alaikum, Ayan.
Hello, do you hear me?
I hear you. Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, alaikum salam. So my question is, I hope I get to, it's not very complicated, so I'll try. So the Darwinian understanding of why humans do good is based on, like, it's rooted in self-interest, right?
Yeah.
So in the Islamic perspective, we're told to do good unto others, seeking Allah's rewards. Does that mean that we are selfish, or how do you think this like Islamic perspective is on that?
So you know, in terms of you could frame it in a particular degree as being like concerned with yourself. That is, you're concerned with not being punished, for example. But within the Islamic concept, you're not supposed to treat Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like a vending machine. You're not supposed to just do things for the sake of the rewards only, or for the sake of avoiding the punishment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like for the love of Allah, you know, for the sake of Allah, is the key feature. And if you lack that in your intentions when you're doing things, then it can be considered problematic to a certain degree. So, like, for example, even if Allah said you're not going to get any of this, you're going to not exist at all in the end of it. You know, there's this element of gratitude for that which you have been given. Allah's mercy encompasses all things. You are able to breathe, you are able to enjoy food, you have a period of time where there's pleasure and pain, there's the ups and the downs, and these things can complement each other. The bad things you experience in life can help you appreciate the good things. And all of this, whether or not whatever was going to happen with regards to the future, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is still considered something worthy of worship, something that you should be grateful towards. And so this is integral to our concept of seeking the pleasure of Allah. It's not just for, we don't say seeking it for my pleasure. We say seeking it for the pleasure of Allah. So that in this sense, it's wholly other centered. We're focused on whether or not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with our deeds. And not just because of the punishment, and not just because of the reward, but for Allah's pleasure, whether or not those punishments and pleasures, the punishments or the rewards were available to us at all. So, I would say that would be where we distinct.
So you wouldn't agree with their perspective on like why humans do good.
Yeah, basically, because at the end of the day as well, we're not even guaranteed to have paradise.
Yeah.
So and we don't see the benefits of that immediately either. And we're not just talking about immediately. We're talking about like beyond the point of death. And so there's this whole epistemic issue where, like, obviously, well, what if nothing at the end of it, and what if this, and what if that? And so from like a completely, I guess, skeptical perspective, there's always a possibility that it might not even happen. If you go to this severe skepticism. And so in that sense as well, it's like, well, what is it that's pushing people to sort of aim towards the pleasure of Allah? There's an element of possibility there. And so whereas when you're talking about like sort of in a Darwinian perspective about what goes on here, when we're doing it, we expect to at least see the fruits of that within this lifetime, at least. So there's a huge distinction here between when we expect to receive the rewards of these deeds, either now in this life or in a hereafter, and that point of death and the mystery that surrounds the what occurs after it is a huge distinction between the two as well. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. All right. Well, that was it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Jazakallah khair for joining us. And feel free to join in again in the future, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. MashaAllah, we have been joined by Brother Sharif Abu Layth. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Wa alaikum salam. Maybe I should do that.
Yeah, MashaAllah. How you doing, bro?
Alhamdulillah, good. What about yourself? How's things?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Just still trying to get rid of this flu.
Oh, subhanallah, man.
Yeah, it's not going away anytime soon.
It's not the Indian COVID, is it?
No, I got tested. It came out as negative.
Okay.
So alhamdulillah. Let me cough. Yeah, so yeah, not too bad. But yeah, Jazakallah khair for joining us. For those of you who don't know, Brother Sharif, he is a fellow co-host with me over at Thought Adventure Podcast, which is a joint effort between me, Jake, and Abdul Rahman, and also obviously Sharif. He's one of the co-hosts, where we do fortnightly podcasts tackling particular subject areas. We do like a little intro where we go over the problems and the subjects matter. We each have our sort of say on the matter, and then we begin to invite guests on at the end of it. We prefer obviously people who want to challenge the things that we're putting forward, and then we have a back and forth. So check that out if you haven't already. And obviously because I'm on my own now and the other brothers weren't available to sort of help us with this, I've just asked him to jump on and give us a hand. So what would you rather do now? Shall I bring someone else on to the live, or should we check out what's written in the comments section?
Whichever, bro. Whatever you think's best.
All right, let's have a look at this one. Unrelated question. Well, it's the whole point of the show. Don't worry if they're related or unrelated. How do you deal with folks that equate the issue of homosexual rights with civil rights? They'll say if you don't support gay marriage, you don't support African Americans. It's false equivalency to a degree, isn't it? Like there's nothing distinct between race and sexual orientation.
Yeah, and also I think maybe also the issue is maybe from a Muslim perspective. Some Muslims feel that in order for us to live in the West, in order to gain our rights, then we have to support all minority rights. And I think the problem is that it sort of reduces Muslims to an ethnicity, or equate it to some sort of orientation, some sort of identity type politics. Whereas Islam is more than that. Islam is it defines and shapes our viewpoint on life, and there's going to be naturally some sort of friction between what we view as normative values and what the wider secular, liberal, capitalistic society views as normative values. So we have to recognize that. And yeah, we don't want to make our lives difficult here, but there are going to be boundaries in terms of engaging with certain groups and how we engage with them from an Islamic basis. So I think the issue is that we have examples during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Mecca, where he was a minority and he was living amongst the Sahaba, and they were living in a situation where there was a lot of difficulty and antagonism towards what he was bringing. And he demonstrated how we should operate, and I think maybe that's the better way to look at the situation, as opposed to just trying to view the problem as just simply about how to secure our rights and safety and equate ourselves equivalent to other minority groups.
Yeah, definitely. And also we have a particular understanding of what these like sort of marriages are supposed to develop. They're supposed to develop families and things like that. And with that in mind, you know, we also would continue to disagree with this idea of being promiscuous, for example, of like just kind of sleeping around with whoever you want, whenever you want. Because the aim of that sort of behavior doesn't have it like a sort of grand goal in mind. It's based in hedonism in that sense. And we, for that reason, we would say avoid this, because there are sort of negative consequences that come along with certain kinds of behavior. And we you know, want to avoid that. And it's not to say that, like, for example, there's the example of alcohol in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he can even acknowledge that in certain things there's negative consequences, and this might be why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making it forbidden. So with alcohol, he says, you know, there is bad in it that you should avoid. But he'll even acknowledge in this that there may be things that are of benefit. There may be positives that you might see in this sort of thing, but the negative outweighs the positive, and for this reason, you should you know, stay clear of it. So you've got to keep these things in mind as well. There is a wisdom behind these rulings, and that wisdom manifests itself upon following the law, and you know, sticking to the Quran and the Sunnah.
And obviously, just as a point, isn't it, is that this doesn't mean we go around because somebody disagrees with us or disagrees with the Islamic viewpoint and things, that we treat them unjustly, or you know, we're harsh or aggressive. In the same way, if we come across somebody who's, you know, maybe having a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, which is again outside of what the Islamic paradigm is in terms of relationships, our approach is to engage with them, discuss with them, and also treat them fairly as well, you know, from the Islamic perspective. So just because we might not necessarily articulate and argue for their rights, you know, to, like, for example, same-sex marriages to gain our rights, doesn't necessarily mean that therefore we're going to be, you know, aggressive at them in workplaces or as neighbors or anything like that. It's nothing to do with that. It's just obviously we have a particular framework by which we operate in.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a perfect answer to that. So there's another question here saying, do you have any sisters on the service? Brilliant question. We don't at the moment, which is why also we would like for sisters, if you have the experience, you know, if you've dealt with mentoring, counseling, any of these kind of things, if you have the skill set that obviously we need in terms of the Lighthouse project that we've got going on here, it would definitely benefit if you could obviously volunteer your services if you have the time and the space in your schedule to be able to do so. So do that. If you're watching this now and you think you can help us with that, please go to sapiensinstitute.org, and then if you click on this on the top of the screen, there should be let me pull it up, probably the easier way of doing it. At the top of the screen, there'll be a section to volunteer on. Share screen. There you go. So if you go here to request, there's a section here on volunteering, and then here all the things we need help with, and the Lighthouse projects is included in that. So the mentoring, etc. You just fill in your details, you upload your CV, you agree to the anti-extremism guidance agreement, and submit. And then, inshallah, if you've got the skill set that we require for Lighthouse, etc., we'll bring you on, inshallah. So, brilliant question. We've got someone in the back, so I'll bring them on. So, Ahmed Abu Rashi, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Abu Risha, it's Abu Risha. Assalamu
Abu
alaikum.
Risha. Sorry. Forgive me for mispronouncing.
Yeah, it's fine. No worries. It's written in a really awkward way. I understand.
No problem.
So thank you for having me. My question, I had a different question in mind first, but after like the last person you had on, I changed my question to an extension of that, basically. So the conclusion you arrived at is that basically there's something more to what you want from Allah than just the reward and punishment, right? Like that's not the whole thing you want from Allah. You may do good in the name of Allah in order to get Allah to love you and to do Allah's sake, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah, and also to add to that, it's because he's worthy of worship, which is fundamentally the most important thing. He's the most worthy of worship, independent of anything around that. And so, like there's an element of severe gratitude that is required, regardless of everything else that sort of comes off of that.
Yeah, I understand. So my question is basically, even if we say that, doesn't it all still come down to what you do for yourself? Because I heard this somewhere before, I don't remember where, but like it changed the way I think about how people act and make decisions. It basically says that the way people think is that they weigh their options and see what's most beneficial to them, and that's how everyone thinks. No one thinks in any other way, right? So and this is how you think about any issue in your life. So the way you choose between like 2 options or 3 options or whatever is you see what's most beneficial to you, and that's the whole thing, right? And like that, the meaning of the word most beneficial to you here, or like what acts most in your self-interest, doesn't necessarily mean like what makes you feel the best instantaneously or what gives you the most pleasure, but basically what you believe will make you feel the best even later on, right? So for example, if I say I'm doing this for Allah, if I don't believe that this will be good for me in one way or another, maybe it will make me feel bad for not doing it because I believe it's right. So I'll feel bad about it. I'll feel like I'm doing something wrong. So in the end, it all comes down to you feeling like, as long as the word I is present in your in the action, it still means that it returns to you. It's something that you want to do, right? Like for example, if I say I'm saving my son from death, for example. Why do you save him from death? Because I care for him. There's still I there. You were the one who cares. You save him because you care, right? Not anything for your son. It's for you, right?
Yeah.
Even
but
if
it's not
sounds selfless.
No. If you say I do this, it's not necessarily for you, just simply because you're participating in that. So, for example, if my daughter was in danger, now, in terms of like how I would be feeling in that, what happens is there's a severe sense of adrenaline that starts pumping through me. I'm not thinking anymore. I'm just acting. I'm not thinking about paradise, hellfire. I'm thinking solely about the safety of my daughter, not necessarily because I care for her, but because she's in danger. And, I'm not thinking, oh, I care for her, therefore I need to do this. Like, no, you're acting. It's intuition. You're moving forward and you're doing what you can. Now, you might even be fully aware of the fact that this is going to cause you pain. There's the examples of the person that jumps in front of a car, a moving vehicle, to save a child. In this, there's no sense of like, I'm benefiting from this, because you're not necessarily you're acting. You've not got time to think about things like the afterlife and stuff like that. No, people, they jump in the line of danger. They run, head first in a battle. They might, with adrenaline pumping, with thought process shut down, because they're so focused on what's ahead of them and engaging with their experience.
Yeah, I agree. But like the thing is, even when you say it like that, the decision you take to go and save your daughter, like for example, when I say I'm gonna go save my daughter, like what I mean here is not like you stop and like you start thinking while your daughter is dying and you say, I'm gonna start saving her. That's not what I mean. I mean, like when you choose to go and save her, you make this decision. Like you choose between the decision of saving her and not saving her. Why would you choose saving her from not saving her, right? Like that's the point. When you choose, I will save her, and you start justifying why I'm going to save her. You'll say,
But
for
that's the
example,
point.
because
This is
I
the
love my
point.
daughter. I
Yeah,
care
yeah,
for.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is
So
the point.
you
That
care
would
for your
be
daughter,
if
right?
you were to try to justify it, but you don't
Yeah.
always
So
have
like,
the but you don't always have that option. Now, the intention is affected by the justification. Now, if there's something that kicks off straight away, and you've got to act immediately, there's no contemplation there, and so there's no justification, and so the intention is purely reactionary. There's no thought process behind it.
Yeah,
Whether or not
brother, is your question specifically about that the reason why we do good actions in Islam and stay away from bad actions is because of the direct consequences of those actions in the hereafter? Is that
no.
your?
No, my question is, not my question, but like what I'm trying to assert is that from what I understand, from like my thinking and my reflection is that whichever actions we take, it all comes down to self-interest. Even when you say, for example, when you jump in front of a train to save your daughter, even if that's gonna kill you, you still, if you didn't choose that option, you the downsides of not saving your daughter outweigh the advantages of not saving your daughter, even if
Okay.
you're gonna
Yeah.
die or you're gonna be gravely injured. So
So
it still all comes down to like your self-interest. That's my
Yeah, so brother, I'm just trying to understand. Are you trying to equate? You're not equating this, or are you equating this to the idea of reward and punishment of the hereafter?
Oh no, that can be related, but like that's not the main point. It doesn't have to be like we can involve that idea. It's still there, but that's not the main point. Like regardless of whether there is an afterlife or not, when you make a decision, it's because you believe it's best for you. So if there is an if we say, for example, okay, you're doing it for the afterlife, and what if we take that away? If we say there is no afterlife and you're gonna die either way, nothing is gonna happen, but you still choose to save your daughter. Why would you still choose to save your daughter and not choose to save your daughter? That's what I'm saying. You weigh these two options, and like the way you decide whether you choose this one or that one, what is that based on, right?
Can I ask you,
if we
what
say,
would you say about Shaitan then? Iblis. Iblis knows this hellfire, knows about God, and he acts very destructively. He knows everything he's going to do is not necessarily for his self-interest. It's not putting him in a better place. He's going straight to hell.
Honestly,
Why is he doing that?
I don't know. I don't know. That does. I'm not saying this is what I believe. I'm just saying.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I'm just offering it because
I'd be glad if you prove me wrong.
That's the most extreme example, the Shaitan. But there are people that act in very destructive ways, not in their own self-interest as well. So you can if you want to, obviously we can go to the opposite extreme here. We don't necessarily need to approach this in terms of the one that wants or desires heaven or paradise, but maybe the one who desires or wants his own destruction, wants hellfire, eggs God on to punish him. How do we deal with that?
That's if my point stands. Yeah, so my point stands still that if Shaitan had the same, let's just suppose that the Shaitan thinks like humans and has the same idea of self-interest, because I don't know about that, but let's say that the Shaitan with them, by what I'm saying, will be making the exact same weighing process. He knows that.
Oh, we've lost you. You still there? Can you hear him, Sharif, or is it just me?
No, I can't hear him. So I think I understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah, go on.
So firstly, I think the issue is if you detach a particular viewpoint on life and you leave human beings to make decisions, then I pretty much agree that human beings will make decisions based upon self-interest. And I think you have a situation where people, even when they give money to other people, say they see some poor beggar, there's an emotional reward they get from giving that money. Yeah. So there is some sort of emotional payback that they can achieve from it. Yeah. So, and I can understand that. And, maybe somebody, he might feel such urgency and guilt at the suffering of another person. That's what drives him to do the action. So it's to the relief of the anxiety and the guilt that might be the motivating factor. Yeah. However, I think that's not analogous when it comes to the Islamic paradigm. And the reason why I say that is from a number of reasons. Firstly, is because when we want to do an action, and we're like outweighing between two actions, it's not based upon our feeling, our emotional sentiment. Yeah, it's not based upon, can I overcome the guilt, or is the guilt going to consume me? So therefore, I'm going to do this action, or I'm not going to do this action. Ultimately, you come back to a particular viewpoint on life, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. The Quran is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that I'm going to face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for judgment. Now, somebody might say, yeah, but isn't that just, separating, just using the same idea of consequence upon the individual? But I think the difference here is that this idea, this thought, is rooted upon a rational basis. Somebody has made a fundamental rational decision to adopt a particular moral outlook, unlike most people who just adopt moral outlooks based upon their environment, the society, and the socialization that they have. So this is one thing which is different. The second thing is that the rewards and punishments are to create a permanency in the moral decisions that we make. Yeah. So, this idea that a moral act has meaning, has an objective meaning, has a foundation that's anchored. We want to know, we sense we're built with this attribute, this qadr within us that desires to do actions that are fundamentally meaningful. And to make something fundamentally meaningful means to anchor it in something which is eternal. Yeah. So it's not something that's transient. It's not like, well, whatever I do in this life, it's absolutely meaningless. There's actually going to be a fundamental consequence which holds for eternity. And this is where reward and punishment. So reward and punishment makes our actions and our moral decisions meaningful in an objective way, or it grounds it, fundamentally. And that's obviously grounding it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and abiding by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has established. So the reward and punishment help shapes for us our view on life, and also shapes for us our view about the action itself. And so for example, when we say you need to be good to your parents, and good to your mother, and we learn about the rewards to that, then that shapes the nafsiyah, the emotional disposition of a human being, that even though he may have his own personal angst, maybe his mother didn't treat him right, or his parents didn't treat him right, whatever it is, he shapes his emotional disposition so that his likes and dislikes are shaped according to this idea. And this idea is this rational foundation that my purpose of life is to worship and submit to the Creator. So the good actions, the bad actions, the reward, the punishment, the visualization of what happens when you do a good action on the Day of Judgment, and the visualizations of the bad actions and the punishment are there to sort of shape the emotional disposition, and therefore anchor our decisions upon something that's firm and foundation. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
So
go on.
All right. So basically, even when you say that these sorts of rewards and punishments are not exactly what you're aiming for, like they're not the whole point. They're there to shape your emotional disposition. Still, what I'm saying is
there's
this
always a
emotional
reference
disposition
to the self. Is what you're getting at, I think. So what's the problem with things being referenced to the self when the self acts? Why is that an issue for you?
What do you mean by that?
So you're saying this because you clearly think that there's a problem with it, because you're saying you want us to refute it. Yeah? Why is there a problem with it? What's
because
the problem?
that means a person who does bad and a person who does good, they're both acting on this weighing system. It's basically a form of determinism. That's what I'm getting at, right? So it basically, like, what determinism does is remove the idea of good and evil. Everyone just is a machine, right? They just work like a machine. So these emotional dispositions, for example, if they're engraved in you from childhood, this becomes your what do you call it? The thing you weigh stuff with. What is it called?
The scales.
Yeah, your scales, right? These become your scales, right? So having different scales doesn't matter, because you still use this form of judgment. Everyone uses it, right?
Yeah,
so
but
you have no control over it, right? That's what
no. So there's a huge jump that you've made there. So you went from saying that there's an issue with things being sort of self-referential or in self-interest to some degree, or that we can somehow in every act say that the self was somehow involved in that in the objective. Now you've gone from there.
I mean, no,
to
not
talking
that the
about
self is
determinism.
involved. Can I just like correct what you said, because you
Go
might
on.
have misrepresented myself? Yeah, I'm
No,
just
no,
saying
no.
it's not that the self is always there. That's not the point. The point is that it
In
always
the
comes back
objective.
to you.
Yeah,
That always comes back
that's
to
what I
you,
said.
right? It's
Yeah,
something
that's
for
what I said.
you, like it's something that helps you, right? Or
So just to
in your
recap,
self-interest.
So to recap, when I said the self is always present in the objective, that is, when you're aiming at something, the aim includes the self, which is what is exactly what you said there.
Okay, I understand. I think I
Yeah,
understand what you mean.
So,
But I'm trying to
Yeah.
understand this. I think also just trying to understand, how does that result in determinism? Are you just simply saying that the human being is acting upon emotional reaction, sign, stimuli, response? Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily. I'm talking more like about the way we think, right? It's not like basically just hard determinism like the other determinism can be understood as. It's more like if all humans think like this, then how can you say that a person is bad or good? Because they're all just using their scales that they've been given, right?
Yeah.
So if
No,
I've
but
been
then-
giving the scales of Islam,
But brother, I think the difference is this: is
Mm.
if you've got a person who doesn't think, who doesn't think about where his moral objective should be, then obviously he's going to act according to his own likes and dislikes. Yeah, he's going to act in a way which maybe he grew up in a household which was very caring, helped people out, told him the importance of helping people out. So when he sees somebody suffering, his emotional disposition is to help that person out. Yeah. And I agree, you can't turn around and say that person is doing good in a objective sense. Yeah. I agree upon that point. But the difference between a person who's like this and a person who thinks on a rational basis and says, my morality is built upon fundamentally asking two questions: what comes before life and what comes after life? And then based upon that question, or those two questions, he says, God exists, a creator exists, created me, my instincts, my biological needs. And on the day of judgment, he will judge how I satisfied my instincts and biological needs. Now, obviously, that this presupposes that there are good rational reasons to believe in a creator, which obviously as Muslims we believe, and there's good rational reasons that the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ is a true prophet, and the Quran is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, we believe there's good rational reasons to justify that. So our viewpoint to say, because we are here, we are created by this creator, we're going to be judged after this life by the creator, means that now our viewpoint is very much different. Yeah. So let me give you I'll give you a very basic example of this. And this is an
I think you
example.
misunderstand, though. I think you misunderstand. That's not what I meant. But I mean, even if you say like a person, when this person like he should like think in this rational manner in order to reach the conclusion that Allah exists, and like he has to follow
And then
this
he'll shake
moral
his
framework.
morality, won't it?
Yeah, but the thing is, what I'm saying is, take an atheist and a Muslim. Okay, this person has has the mindset of an atheist. He rejects Islam because in his mind, Islam is like, even if he sought out like the rationality behind Islam and all of those things, and decided to not take Islam, not take in Islam, or become a Muslim, it's the same reason the Muslim decided to become a Muslim, right? Let's say he was an atheist as well and decided to be a Muslim. This person, he weighs those two things. He says, should I be a Muslim or should I not be a Muslim? And this other person does the same thing, right? So the person who decided to be a Muslim, he decided that the advantages of being a Muslim outweigh the advantages of not being a Muslim, right? And the other person did the same.
I don't agree with that approach, actually, to be honest.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Yusuf, sorry.
So one of the issues.
I mean, it sounds very robotic, but like
no,
it sounds very robotic. Like
it's not that. The issue here is, so you're drawing out overlap. So you're seeing that there is some similarity between X and Y, and then making the claim that therefore X and Y, that how do we make a distinction between them? Now, just because you can draw some similarities between X and Y, it doesn't mean X equals Y. It doesn't mean they are exactly the same, or that there's nothing distinct.
What are X or Y? I don't understand. What are X and Y in my example?
So X being the atheist, Y being the Muslim. It could be anything. Hence,
okay. I think I understand what you mean. Yeah.
Right. So you're saying, for example, I can draw some sort of line between the atheist and the Muslim where any act is based on the weighing up of something, or that it's always self-referential. That is, that it's always self-concerning. Now, that doesn't mean that every act that falls under these categories is identical. Now, I'll give you an example. So, is the person that likes or enjoys causing suffering and pain to others in a sadistic, evil, malicious sense, and he does that because he gets something from it. He receives a joy. You know, you think of a very evil person that has a pleasure from the causing of pain in others. That's self-referential. Now, simply because that's self-referential, and for example, say the person that gets joy from making sacrifices for the people around him, and like for giving away his wealth, for giving away his time for the sake of the pleasure of others, even though it causes a pain to him, are these really equivalent simply because you can draw a line between the fact that there's some sense of being self-referential, between there's some sense that they're weighing things up, and they feel.
Let's
do you
go
know
to the. Yeah, I know what you mean.
The point here is simply that your emphasis is always on what makes them similar, but it feels like every time you give an explanation of what you mean, you neglect what makes them distinct. But just because there is overlap, sometimes the overlap is the secondary thing here. It's the thing we can be concerned with, but it's not the fundamental problem. The issue is what is it that makes them distinct from one another? Can you identify things that makes the person that acts in their own self-interest, in the case of the murderer or the one that causes pain in the other, is there anything distinct from that, from the person who gives sacrifices? He gives away his wealth, he gives away his time, he gives away his energy for the pleasure of others at the detriment to his own. He can't enjoy the worldly life. There may be things that he wants. There may be pleasures that he desires in this world, but he puts them to the side for the sake of the orphan, for the sake of the widow, for the sake of the poor. Is there a distinction between them?
Yeah, so what I'm saying, when I think about it this way,
just answer the question first.
No. I'm gonna go to the question. I'm not going to. When I think about it this way, what I always do is I go to the person doing good, and I think what makes this person different from the guy doing bad, right? Like the person who's a serial killer and gets pleasure from killing people or whatever, and like the other guy who uses his time to do good and help others for the price of losing out on doing whatever pleasures he wants to do, right? So what I think is, the way I think about it is basically the guy who's self-sacrificing, how is he different, right? So this guy, why is he doing this action? Why? So I have to ask why. When I say why, you say, for example, okay, this guy does it because he fears Allah. He believes this will increase his rank in Jannah, or like even if we remove the afterlife, let's remove the afterlife. So there are no rewards, right? There's only like the good deed that he's doing, and that's it. So Allah will love him more.
You're breaking up
because like as responsible to reduce them to the same thing. So I can understand, like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right,
so the question is still here. Yeah, right. So fair enough. There's always a why.
Let me finish. I'll just finish this part. Okay. This point. Yeah. So I'm just saying, basically, this guy, let's say he doesn't do it for Allah. He doesn't do it for the afterlife. He just does it because he does it. But you still ask, why do you do it? Okay, why do you not, for example, go and play video games instead of like helping the poor, for example? So he says, I help the poor because I feel like when I do it, I'm doing good, right? I'm doing good. I'm doing the right thing. So we're on to something, right? The right thing. What does the right thing mean? When I'm doing the right thing, I feel like I'm doing good. It feels like I'm making a difference. I'm trying to speak as the good person, right? Instead of not doing anything and wasting my time. So wasting time makes you feel bad. It makes you feel like you're doing something wrong. You feel like you're doing something wrong. But when you do good, you feel like you're doing good, right? So the weights here, the scales here are basically, I feel like I'm doing good, and like I feel like I matter, there's something I'm doing, or I waste my time and I feel like I'm not doing anything. Sometimes the scales tip and you go and you play video games, and like you endure the feeling of being like meaningless and like you're not making a difference, or the scales tip in the other direction and you go and do good and feel, and like you feel like you're doing good for the sake of leaving out video games, for example, right? So
Yeah,
it's
so
still like
the question now
you're
is
the
like,
one
how
who
do we
does it, right?
define right and wrong?
Yeah. So what did he do here that's different from the other guy? The other guy, what does the other guy say? Should I torture people and get enjoyment from it, or should I consider their feelings and their suffering and their family? So the scales may tip in this direction. He thinks that, okay, I'm gonna ignore their feeling. I'm gonna feel like I'm doing wrong. I'm gonna feel bad about it, but I'm still gonna get a lot of enjoyment from torturing them, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna torture them. I don't care about the bad feeling. He suffers
Okay.
from it a little bit, but he still gets.
So this is linked to the idea of whether or not the act is praiseworthy or not. Now,
Advantages. Made this choice because he believes the advantages outweigh the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, right?
okay,
That's the point of it.
no problem. So it kind of boils down to whether or not the act is praiseworthy, and then that begs the question: well, praiseworthy according to who? And it's the others. So in terms of, like, you've got obviously one level of it, the others would be the people in this world with you, and then you have the other element of it, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he has this vantage point that none of us do, and he's all wise and he is all knowing, and he can see how the sacrifices you're making they have a net worth in terms of the good that they do on the earth, the good that's happening. Like, Allah is not just telling you to do good and bad arbitrarily. Allah is wise. You can't disassociate his guidance for mankind from his wisdom, from his knowledge. He's telling you to do things with it. He even says, do you think I created mankind without purpose? Do you think I created all of this without a goal in mind? So when you're doing things, so the person, for example, that's making these sacrifices in the dunya, there is a net gain for the community, for everyone else, and there is a net loss for himself on the earth. And because of that, you can refer to this as praiseworthy, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will recompensate him for what he has lost on this earth in the hereafter. And so, but the point here is its praiseworthiness is in relation to everyone around them. So it's not just like it's multifaceted. You've got the connection in terms of the person doing it for the pleasure of Allah. Maybe there's the element of wanting paradise, of fearing hellfire, etc. All of that. But there is also going to be, in many cases as well, a connection with the community. That they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the believers or the community. And because of that, you love the community as well. And so you want good for the community, for the sake of Allah. Everything's always connected to Allah, but that doesn't mean that there isn't elements of other things as well. And because there's all of this in there, it's considered praiseworthy. Why? Because it's associated with acting wisely. Because Allah is wise, and when He commands you something, the decision is wisdom. Now, on the other hand, you have this. Mashallah, we've been joined by Brother Fahad. Let me get him in. Assalamu alaikum, Fahad.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. How are you?
Now, alhamdulillah. So, on the other hand, you have the evil, malicious person. Now, when he's acting, what's praiseworthy in here? With regard to the other, who else is going to praise him? He's only praising himself. This is more self-centered than anything, because there is no consideration for the other whatsoever. This is a distinction. This is incredibly important. With the other person, there are others concerned here. There's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's the community, and there's even a loss on part of that person. With the malicious one, there's no concern for the other. Obviously, he's causing pain for them. And so his gain is at their loss. That's not the case with the believer. That's not the case with the one who does things for the fear of Allah and makes sacrifices. Not only that, he's not even concerned with Allah. He's not concerned with the pleasure of Allah. Contrary to that, he's incurring the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The only thing he's concerned with is his own pleasure. There's no consideration for anything else at all. Now, although you might be able to say we can go through all of these others and then end back at the self with the person who does good for the sake of Allah, for the sake of the community, etc., etc. Although there might be a line that draws back to the self, it's not standing alone with itself. It includes other people in its bubble, in its considerations. And therefore it's praiseworthy because it's also associated to the guidance given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is attached necessarily to his wisdom and his knowledge. You don't find any of these attributes or these qualities in the acts of the malicious, evil, malevolent person. That's a huge distinction. Yeah, go ahead.
So just before you interrupt,
Yeah.
let me just, if I could also, do you believe that human beings can make rational decisions which are not affected by emotion?
Okay, so I'll have to think about that. So rational decisions that are not affected by emotion. So, but like, what
So, for
do you mean by
example, 2
emotion?
plus
I
2
mean,
equals 4. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Can
yeah,
somebody come to that
like,
as a
what
rational or logical conclusion?
Yeah, I guess, but like when I say, for example, emotional, if I mean here, what he like, what do you call it? Like, what his dispositions are. For example, if he's a cult leader who thinks that 1 plus 1 equals 3, for example, and like he's really pushed in that direction.
Yeah, no.
And, like,
We're not
there's a
asking
reason
the
for him to go
effect,
through.
because we
Yeah,
just
but
need
like,
to sort of keep this from going off track too much. So,
yeah, I
because
wanted to
we've been
ask
here for a while as
brother.
well, we do need to wrap up.
I just what it is that I think the issue is this, is you're
I just
saying
wanted
that
to comment on what
every
brother Yusuf said.
emotion, I understand, but I think the issue is this: you think that every decision, even the intellectual positions that a person holds, are all based upon some sort of emotional reward that a person gets from it. Yeah, some sort of feeling that a person gets to it. So when I was explaining, what I was explaining is we believe that there is good rational foundational reasons. So when an atheist holds a position, it's not because I think, well, he just had a different rationality and reasoned it in a different way. I believe he's being irrational. I believe he's fundamentally being inconsistent in the methodology of thinking. Yeah. And I believe that it's actually his emotion that's getting in the way. And as a Muslim, what we try to do, and obviously I'm speaking to a Muslim, I'm not, but I'm just saying generally, as Muslims, what we try to do is we separate our emotions, we take it out, and we investigate the subject matter as is. Yeah. Whether that's the nature of the creation, whether it's limited, finite, dependent, that it is in need for something which is greater than itself, which is unlimited, independent, ayah creator, or whether it is the Quran, whether it's the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it could be a product of human production or not. And we take away the human sort of emotional biases that we have or we may have in order to investigate this question. And if we do that, we can come to the conclusion that the good and the bad is that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decided for us. Yeah. Whether it's intuitive in us or whatever, but irrespective, that what the Sharia, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought within the Quran and the Sunnah is good. Yeah. And we can arrive at why we adopt that as the authority through good, strong, rational reasons. And people who are presented the same message, the same information, the same convincing arguments, reject it. We believe that they are being irrational. They're not being rational there. So the issue is that can we make logical, rational decisions independent of any emotional drives that wants us to adopt a particular position? Yeah, emotional biases.
I mean, when you want to make any like decision in your life, you go through the effort of making the decision simply because you have emotional drives to go there, right? Like emotion, without emotion, you have no reason to do anything, right? So,
So I'll give you an example.
everything is,
Imam Ghazali.
yeah.
Imam
So
Ghazali. He
can
gave
I
an
just
example.
interject just for a second?
Yeah. No.
I mean, I really wanted to comment on what Brother Yusuf said earlier, because like I had something in mind I wanted to say to that, but I mean, is that fine?
Okay, well, just real quick.
Because like
I mean,
we were following the line, and I thought we were reaching a conclusion, right? We were narrowing down the issue, so I wanted to
sure. So
get into that.
just as someone coming in, now I heard a little bit about the discussion earlier, but I wanted to kind of get to the crux of what you're asking, right? Because it seems like we're kind of going around and around, and so and correct me if I'm wrong in my understanding, because obviously I'm coming in a bit late, but what you're saying is that there are, you make decisions based on, for something being right or wrong, and that those are based in emotion, right? That's the last thing that you just mentioned, correct?
I mean,
right?
You can put it that way, but like it's more of like any decision that a person makes are based on a scale within them that they've been given throughout their lives. For example, like what I'm saying is basically a sort of environmental determinism, like your determinism based on your environment or your genes or whatever.
Right.
So, for example,
Okay.
if you've been taught through Islam,
right.
But it's can I just I'll just finish this part.
Sure.
Yeah, just to make things clear, because you might misunderstand. So what I'm saying is basically, it's not just that you've been taught Islam throughout your life, so you don't want to let it go, or like you can't think any other way. It's more like throughout your life you make choices based on what's more advantageous to you, and there's no like emotion in there. Like there is emotion, but like in the sense that you can't say, okay, no, this is wrong or this is right. What you think is right and wrong, that also goes into like this weighing process. And like through this weighing process, an atheist reaches the conclusion that, okay, I'm not gonna adopt Islam, or an atheist reaches the conclusion that he is gonna adopt Islam.
Sure.
And
So
these two atheists, they made two different decisions. They're both like the same. They're both they both made these different. This person didn't do anything wrong or right, and neither did the other person. Right? That's what I'm saying. Like I think I went into more details on this. I think it's a bit unclear now, but that's fine.
No. I think where the question seems to be headed is in the question of determinism. Would I be incorrect in saying that? In other words, if we're already predetermined with a certain scale within our disposition, then if we go against that scale, or how do we go against that scale? Is that what you're asking? Did we lose you? You had a...
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Sorry,
yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah,
I forgot to unmute myself. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sure.
So that's one consequence of like my idea. But like what mainly the idea is that whichever choice you make in your life, any choice, it always comes down to your own self-interests, right? And that leads you down to determinism, obviously. But like that's not the main point. That's just a consequence. The main problem is that whether your every decision actually is based on your own self-interest, even if like you're saving your daughter from like a train crash or whatever, like you sacrifice yourself. So even you sacrificing yourself, that's like that's still based on your own self-interest, because it makes you feel like you did the right thing. For example, if you didn't do it, then you'd have to carry the guilt for the rest of your life, and you think that's less advantageous than even sacrificing your own life, right? Even if there's no reward in the afterlife, or even if Allah doesn't exist, or Allah will not love you for it, you just do it because you think this is the right thing, quote unquote, right?
Sure.
So it all comes down to you. You feel that you did the right thing. You did this. You did that. You're the one at the center of it, right? So it's all self-interest. This leads to determinism, but that's just like a consequence. I didn't want this to become a determinism discussion.
Sure.
I wanted to be focused more on this idea, right?
So what's the problem? Like, I agree with you. People work in obviously it's about self-interest. So what's the problem?
So the problem here is that all people cannot be blamed for doing right or wrong, because right or wrong doesn't exist anymore. It's all self-interest. Your self-interest may be different from others. Some people's self-interest is following the path of Allah and becoming a Muslim, and some other people's self-interest still is not doing that, or becoming, I don't know, like something bad, something that goes against that. So these two people, they did the exact same thing. They didn't do anything wrong, or they didn't do anything different. They did the exact same thing, but just reach different conclusions that they have no control over, because that's what they think their self-interests, where their self-interests lie, right? And Brother Yusuf said, maybe,
so do you wait, let me interject here real quick. So do you believe that right and wrong do not exist? There's no such thing as ethics or morals?
I mean, following this thought process, yes, but like I personally don't believe that. I'm just really trying to disprove this idea.
Wait, hold on. Before you get to, why don't you personally believe that?
I'm saying following with this idea, I think.
But I'm saying, look, we don't want to take ideas in a vacuum, right? So obviously, if it has merit, then you adopt it, right? So when you say I don't follow this idea, why don't you follow this idea?
All right. So if this idea has not been disproven, let's say that, and like this idea is what I think is correct, then yes, that there is no such thing as right or wrong anymore, because we're all doing the exact same thing, which is follow our own self-interest. Does that make sense?
Okay, so there is no. So what you're saying is, based on that, there is no correct and incorrect choices a person can make.
Yeah, if we say this is correct, like what I said, all of what I said is correct, and like it has not been disproven. I hope it will be disproven.
No. Okay, so what I'm saying is, does that mean there is no objective reality? Because when you take this to its logical conclusion, right, it means there's no such thing as truth or falsehood either.
Okay, I just realized there's a better way of putting this. Basically, if like we say
Wait,
Islam is
wait.
there, everything is there.
Before you put it in a different way, just
No,
the
no, I'll
question that
answer
I
your
had.
question. I'll answer your question. Yeah, I'll answer your question. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying, basically, if we say that Islam is the truth, Allah is there, and He puts all of the rules, and like there's right and wrong, and these people did the exact same thing we were talking about. It's all according to their self-interest. Then it's not that there is no right or wrong. There may be right and wrong said by Allah, but like I mean, astaghfirullah, Allah would not be fair, right? Because
Well,
these people
wait.
had no choices.
So listen. Before we get to
Yeah.
Allah, Islam, let's put all that
Yeah.
aside for a second, right? Because we're
Okay.
conflating a number of different issues. So the
Mm.
core issue, what the conclusion you came to was that there can be no right and wrong. And I said the logical endpoint of that means that there's no such thing as truth and falsehood. Then that's the logical conclusion for that. Is that what you believe?
I mean, okay, I'm kind of confused. So let's just like think about this again. So you're saying basically that let's say there's no Allah, there's no reward, there's nothing. There's just these people, and they're acting on their own self-interest. In this situation, would there be right and wrong, or will there not be? Is that your question?
Yeah, is there such a thing as truth?
Truth. I mean, I think that's irrelevant. Like, I mean, they can't live in a reality where there's unfairness.
Look, when you make a decision, it has to be based on some sort of idea of this being true or false. Now, if you say that, look, it's all based 100% on self-interest, okay, fair enough. I don't actually have a problem with that. I think decisions are based on self-interest. But you made the conclusion to say, if that's the case, there's no such thing as right and wrong. So if there's no such thing as right or wrong, then are you saying there's no such thing as truth and falsehood as well?
I'm saying, sorry, I'll correct myself on this.
Sure.
If that's true, then it's not that there's no right or wrong. There can be right and wrong in this situation. But the problem will be that if there is right and wrong, it will be unfair to these people because they're making no choices. They're only following their
Okay, but
self-interest.
wait. You just made, okay, hold on. Here's where you just made a jump. Because you said there's no right and wrong to these people. It would be unfair. Now, it would be unfair is a moral claim that you just made, right? So you have to be careful.
If Allah existed, I'm saying, because I'm trying to put this in an Islamic framework. If we remove Allah, then there is no objective truth. If there is no objective right or wrong. I mean, I'm kind of confused because are we including Allah, including Islam, and there is...
What I said was, let's put that on the side for a second, right? If we're not talking about...
If we say that, then it'll be unfair to these people. But if we say that there is no Allah,
who decides?
No
wait. When you said it's unfair, and we're not taking Islam into consideration, define unfair.
I mean, if we're not taking Islam into consideration, if we're not taking Islam into consideration, then there is no such thing as right and wrong. It's all subjective. It's not unfair. Unfair is in the situation when Allah has put the right and wrong, but He's holding these people responsible for it. So it's unfair because these people are not choosing. But when there's no Islam, it's not a problem of unfair anymore. It's a problem of it's all subjective. There's no right and wrong anymore because if there was, I mean, how will people be able to follow that? They're all just acting on their self-interest. Even if they go down the wrong route, it's not because they technically chose to. They only went down that route because of their self-interest, which is based on their environment, what their skills have been set to, that kind of thing, right? Do you get me, or am I getting a bit confused?
No, I get you, but I think your thought process, I see where you're going, but the issue is that when we bring Islam and Allah and so on and so forth into the discussion, we have a different dynamic by which we're working with, right? But if we take it out of the discussion, then there seems to be a lack of consistency, right? And I don't mean that to knock you. So don't take this in. I'm not trying to win an argument.
I completely understand.
Really clear, right? I'm just trying to understand
don't worry.
where when we say that, okay, if we just say that morals are based on our own subjective state, meaning that we decide what is right or wrong based on our own, our over likes and dislikes, right? So what you're saying in essence is that, if that's the case, and you were mentioning this as well, that it goes down to the idea of determinism. But we'll put that aside for a second. If that's the case, then are you saying that there are no sort of morals that apply to like society? Like, should a murderer be held accountable for him murdering someone? Or do you say, well, because he was just working in his self-interest for that moment, he should not be held accountable?
I'm saying that generally, if we're working by that framework, then no one should be held accountable for anything as like objectively wrong. Like, oh, you did this. This is wrong. You can't say that to anyone.
But do you?
Because,
okay, so here's my.
Yeah.
Do you believe that?
I mean, that's the
You
thing.
as an individual,
I'm trying
do you
to
think?
disprove it, right?
No. I'm not.
Right.
Look, let's transcend proof and disproof for a second, right? Let's look at
Okay.
you like myself as an individual, right? Because look, we can get into some very interesting philosophical gymnastics, right? But the reality is, we want to look at does this have a certain basis in reality? Okay,
Right.
and it's very
So
important
the thing
that it's very important that when we discuss these matters, because look, if we want to do philosophical gymnastics, philosophers have been doing it for a long time, and we can get into like the ifs and buts. But when we really break it down, and let's now go right to the crux of the matter, the logical conclusion of what you're saying is that there's no right and wrong. Now, if there's no right and wrong,
okay, so
is
I'll tell you
something that is
I think I understand what you mean. So
wait. So you said no right and wrong, meaning it's just up to the person themselves. They're all working in their own self-interest, right? If they're working in their own self-interest, we cannot hold someone accountable for, let's say, something as egregious as unjustified murder, right? Someone goes and slaughters or like beheads, takes off the head of a 1-year-old for no reason. So from this, let's say, this philosophical idea that you brought forth, in that viewpoint, this murderer should not be held accountable. Is that correct?
I think I understand what you mean. So basically, my situation is that I'm actually, like, honestly, I'm lost right now. I'm reaching out to you guys to be able to disprove this idea. So I don't know.
Right.
So I no longer have to believe in it, because I'm not saying this is the belief I hold right now, but this is what I find most rational. This is the conclusion I reached after like a couple of months of thinking about this issue. So I'm trying to find someone to disprove this idea, because I can't, right? I'm trying to disprove it in my head, but I can't. So what I believe personally, I'm lost.
No,
I'm not
so I
sure,
understand.
right? I believe in Islam. I believe in Allah. I believe in
right.
That's what I mean.
And I'm not disputing that. But look,
does that make sense?
No, it does make sense.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that I'm going to kind of transcend the issue for a second. Okay, when we spend a lot of time just kind of proving, disproving, in just going through philosophical gymnastics, you could get lost in the issue and focus on the pixel instead of looking at the picture. Right. And so one of the things that I'm going to just advise from a point of view is for you to kind of take a step outside of the issue and ask yourself some pragmatic questions, right? In the sense that the logical conclusion of this thought process, where does it lead you? Does it lead you to say that if there is a murderer, right, and he beheads a 1-year-old, does it lead you to say, yes, that murder should not be held accountable? Now, if that's the case,
it would lead me to that.
Okay, so if it lead you to that, do you feel that is right? Not logically. I'm not talking about philosophical. Do you, as an individual, feel, you know what? I agree with that. That's right.
Obviously, I think beheading a 1-year-old is bad. I think, like, just emotionally, if you tell me this guy beheads a 1-year-old, I'll say, okay, that's bad, that's horrible.
Right. So here's what I'm trying to say is that just like you just did, right? I feel that is bad. That is something which we say is basically built within inside of you, right? Allah has placed a kind of a moral compass within inside of you as an individual. And so I understand what you were saying about, that everyone works on their self-interest, but you're talking about a dynamic human being. So human beings don't make just rational decisions. They make emotional decisions. In fact, most decisions human beings make are based on emotion before it's based on some sort of direct logical, conclusion they come to. So if that's the case, understand that as a complete human being, that sensitivity that you have to the statement of a person beheading a 1-year-old, right? A innocent child, a 1-year-old, if it's not if you're not able to reconcile with this kind of this philosophical rabbit hole you're in, then understand that you have to go with that sort of internal reality of yours, which we say from the Islamic framework is part of your fitrah, right?
Yeah, I understand. The whole problem is the clash between these two. I'm trying to reconcile them. That's the whole point of what I'm doing.
And so one of the things that, and we were talking about this earlier, is that the human being is not just a rational animal or a logical robot. We also have a fitri reality, okay? When we take away the fitri reality and we say, okay, our entire worldview is just based on a rational conclusion, then this is where you get into problems, right? Because let's take what you said from a different angle. I agree that every human works with self-interest.
Actually, can I interrupt? This is urgent. I'm sorry, but like I really have to go. Like I had to go for like a while now, and they're like shouting at me like you have to go home right now. So
okay,
I'm really sorry to cut our I'm really sorry to cut our conversation short. I really want to continue this conversation later. Like will you have this kind of stream frequently?
So this stream is going to be about once a month at the moment. That's inshallah what we're aiming at. But the whole point of it is to introduce people to our Lighthouse services. So if you want to have this discussion, if you go to the sapiensinstitute.org website, there's a section on there that you can called the Lighthouse Project. If you click on it, I'll try and pull it up on the website. One sec.
Yeah, I know how. I actually went through the process before, but then end up applying. But I know how to do it, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, so to go through the process, try to book a session, and then once you've got a slot, you can discuss this with us.
So can I give you a last parting piece of advice, inshallah?
If you like, if you need to go, you can leave. This will be Fahad can still give us advice, and it'll be recorded, so you can just jump back on the stream when it's convenient for you, and you can listen to what he says. And then that way we don't have to
keep on the on-demand version, you mean?
On the YouTube channel. So if you go to the YouTube channel, pull the stream up. It's 2 hours 26 minutes into it. So if you just go to that time mark, you'll be able to hear Fahad's advice as a parting remark. But
here they go calling me again. I really have to go now.
No worries.
I'm really sorry.
The time mark 2:26. Check that out, and you'll hear Fahad's advice and parting remarks. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Huge thanks, by the way. Huge thanks.
No, not at all. Keep in your du'as, inshallah.
Assalamu
alaikum. So yeah, my advice would just be, look, we sometimes get involved in kind of thinking about things in ways where we come up with the doubts within ourselves, right? And we think that we can rationally that we should be able to rationally understand every single question or every single problem that can be presented to us. But one of the things that I'll just mention is that just like we accept that we have limits when it comes to our vision, for instance, right? We have ocular limitations. I cannot see, inside my neighbor's house. All right. Just like that, we have auditory limitations. I can't hear what's going on, in the building, across the street. Just like that, we have cognitive limitations. And one of the things that's very important is to understand where these cognitive limitations lie. Because one could say, well, then how would you have a conversation with a Christian, right? Would it not be on the basis of rationality, right? So we're not saying that we take cognition as an entire project and throw it away. But what we're saying is that understand that there are going to be cognitive limitations. There will be some questions you may not get an immediate answer for. But what you have to go back to is understand the foundations, right? And so we said that we have foundations when it comes to our rationale, and we have foundations when it comes to the fitrah. In other words, you need both in order to have a coherent, comprehensive, practical worldview that brings tranquility to not only the mind, but also the heart. Because we are human beings at the end of the day. We're not just rational robots that make, input and then output and then khalas, we're done, right? But we're a combination of both. So we understand that the intellect has its role, but understand the heart has its role as well. And so therefore you need to engage in both. If you're struggling with an issue, maybe you can come on a live stream and we're trying to now, we're trying to get to the heart of the issue, and maybe we're not able to answer it, just to be very clear. But the reality is that means that it's now a point of time for you to take a step back and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide you. Engage with the Quran, do more righteous acts such that Allah can open that, let's say, shubha for you, right? And answer that doubt. Because if the foundations are strong, we move from those strong foundations and we compare worldviews. And a lot of times I'll tell people, work with alternatives. Let's say Islam is completely wrong. What are you left with, right? You're left with Christianity. You're left with atheism. You're left all of those things. There is no alternative to Islam that can bring a sakina or a tranquility to the heart and the mind, right? And sometimes, we have to understand the foundations before we move on to a certain area where we start to reason certain things out and then end up in a state of doubt, all right? So this basically was what I was going to mention, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. And there's another thing I wanted to touch on. So you're sort of saying, I was trying to refute this. You can do that ad infinitum. Like the question is
exactly.
like, is it always rational to want to refute or have to have a refutation for something? Like, for example, it's the easiest one to go to, but all the time, the universe was created 5 minutes ago. And all your memories and everything, blah, blah, like this is a great example because you can use it in so many different ways. Now, if someone came to me and they were like, I need a refutation for this, it's like, I can't give you a refutation for that.
Yeah.
Yes, it's completely possible that the universe was created 5 minutes ago. It's also possible it was created 6 minutes ago. And all of your memories and anything that exists in terms of historical evidence, all of that was created as well. Along with you and your memories 5 minutes ago. How do you disprove that? How do you give a logical argument that shows that this is necessarily absurd? You can't.
Yeah.
Not absolutely, not in a complete sense. Now, does that mean that I then throw into doubt, for example, that the universe began 14 million years ago, or whatever particular conclusions the scientific community have come up with in a particular regard? Just because this is a possibility,
right?
No, it's absurd. And like, for example, the existence of the external world. This was like a huge thing, and it's sort of rooted in this early Enlightenment idealism, in the sense that the human being is going to be able to get rational syllogisms for everything. Truth will reveal itself through rational syllogisms, and then it's like, right, where do we begin? It's like, let's start with the external world. And then they like set off on that journey, and then they end up with like having to sort of deal with these ideas of idealism, and then comes along all of these other sort of attempts to merge the two, idealism and realism, and you get this back and forth, and the problem never really gets resolved.
Yeah.
And now the question is it unreasonable for the majority of the populace to go about acting as if there is the existence of an external world that is real, that they can engage with, in which there are consequences for the lack of or the making of particular actions? Is it rational for them or reasonable for them to act like that's the case, even though they don't have a logical syllogism, even though they don't have a rational proof for that particular thing, that particular belief? Can they go about acting in the world in that way? Now, this isn't to say there aren't rational arguments for it, and we just haven't come across them yet. And just as in the same sense, it doesn't mean there aren't rational arguments for God and things like that. We've already gone through quite a few of them. We're obviously going to be going through them with Sapiens. We've done them on Thought Adventure podcast as well. So there are arguments, and we do believe there are good reasons to accept certain propositions. But we also don't believe that it's necessarily the case that everyone absolutely needs like this list of logical syllogisms in their pocket for every belief that they hold. It's absurd. There can be things such as basic beliefs, the external world being one of them, and then going down this sort of, it sort of feels like it's fueled by an anxiety, by a desire to sort of need to know everything and to know it absolutely, which is another way of saying wanting the knowledge of God. Like, I need like a completely clear picture, all of it, and you're not going to get that in a short amount of time. A lot of the time it takes a lot of patience. A lot of the time it takes humbling yourself and saying, there's a number of possibilities here, maybe I won't get the answer to this in my lifetime, and then you move on. Like, you look at the evidences that you have available with you,
Yep.
And you incline to the best possible explanation that you have after acknowledging the evidences.
No, absolutely. I mean, and that's what I was getting at, is that like once isn't there a saying where they said that and I may completely butcher the saying, but something to the effect of philosophy is just an exercise to prove your intuitions, or something like that, right? Something that framework, right? Philosophy is just an endeavor that you use to prove that which you believe on intuition anyway, right? And
just so everyone knows, Sheriff has to leave. So
all right.
I'll see you, inshallah. I'll see you on Sunday, 8 p.m.
Yeah, on Sunday, inshallah.
Okay,
8 p.m. for
for
Adventure
inviting me
Podcast.
on for a short period.
Right.
Assalamu
alaikum. Sorry, I just had he was in a rush. I had to carry on, brother.
No. So so when we look at certain issues, even when we look at the Islamic framework and we look at like Islamic history, certain issues that caused Muslims disagreement, right, where we had theological disagreements, a lot of those we can say to this day are not necessarily rationally settled, right? One of the main kind of areas that gives a lot of people trouble is the idea of like predestination, for instance, right? The free will trilemma, as it's known. And that's not a Muslim, non-Muslim issue. It's an issue. And there's no way to square that circle. Like, it doesn't matter what your worldview is. And so those are one of the things that you have to just chalk it up to cognitive limitations. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever he wills is, and whatever he does not will is not. And at the same time, we have the ability to choose. Can you reconcile those two things in a way that's perfect? People have tried. People have given all sorts of examples, the student, the teacher, and this, and the exams, and who knows what, right? And it's not only the Islamic worldview, the Christian worldview has tried to do it. Atheists, if you're trying to reconcile that, can't do it, right? If you have the idea of like physical laws that predetermine literally everything down to your genetics, then basically what you're saying is that everyone is predisposed to do whatever they did. And so those prior causal links are the things that cause you to do what you do. But the problem is we experience the ability to choose. And so you'd have to write off and justify personal experiential knowledge in its entirety in order to meet that particular idea to say we don't have free will. The problem is nobody operates like that. Nobody goes about day to day saying, I don't have free will. I'm just going to sit here and look at the wall, right? You generally don't see that. You see people actually proactively or reactively sometimes making certain actions that they deem to be out of free choice. So in terms of an experiential reality, people recognize that as an experiential reality. Number two, they understand that society, the societal ramifications of saying that there is, that everything is predetermined would be catastrophic, right? I mean, you would have murderers and rapists and everyone just, well, it's not their fault. Oh, well. And unfortunately, we're getting to a certain point like that, right? Where it's getting to that point. But, the point is there's no way to square this circle. And that's why when you look at the tradition, when you look at like the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ, in some hadith, the Prophet ﷺ sees the companions arguing about the issue. And he comes out and the Prophet ﷺ says, was this what I was sent with? Like, is this what I was sent with? And is this, basically the people before you argued about this matter and they were destroyed. And I don't want you arguing about it. Meaning that idea, trying to understand it on a rational basis, you have to hang it in abeyance. You have to understand you have cognitive limitation. Wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun. Allah knows and you don't. وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. You've only been given a minuscule amount of knowledge. Like you compare your knowledge to the knowledge of Allah, right? Like the Quran says, if all the trees were pens and the entire oceans were ink and they were to write down the knowledge of Allah, they could still not exhaust the knowledge of Allah. And us as a human being, we have limited knowledge. And so the thing is that there are some questions you have to just hang in abeyance and understand that the benefit of that reality is different. It's spiritual. The issue of qadr is not the benefit of knowing about it, like the Quran states it, like it's one of the 6 pillars of Iman. So clearly it's important. The Prophet ﷺ is mentioning that you believe in Allah, the messengers, the angels, the day of judgment, and so on. And then he says, وَتُؤْمِنَ بِالْقَدْرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ, that you believe in qadr, its good and its evil. Now, why did the Prophet ﷺ stress that? Not because he wanted you to spend time on trying to unravel the issue, but because it has a certain spiritual benefit that allows you to deal with the vicissitudes of life. That you understand whatever happened by the will of Allah. And whatever the future holds, it's in the hands of Allah. You put your best foot forward, you try your utmost best, and you leave it to Allah. This leads to an internal, spiritual, existential state of tranquility, sakina, right? And that's really what the benefit is. When Allah says in the Quran that Ala awliya Allah la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. Indeed, those people who are the awliya, the people who are close to Allah, la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun, there's no fear upon them and there's no sadness. When you think about sadness, what are you sad about typically? A person's typically sad about things that happened in the past. Had I only done this, if I only would have gone to trade school, if I only would have gone to medical school, I would be, all of this, if I only would have done this, all of that is in the past because that can lead to sadness. You understand, we put that in the realm of Allah and say that is the qadr of Allah, right? So a person that's in that spiritual state, no sadness. What about fear? Typically, what do you have khawf of? What do you fear of? Oh, what happens if this happens in the future? What happens if I get robbed? What happens if I'm not able to get this job? All those things have to do with the future. And so when it comes down to it, a person that has their heart rooted in the idea of qadr, right? That huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. Allah is powerful and has power over all things. And whatever Allah wills is, and whatever Allah does not will is not. This person has spiritual, existential stability. And that's really the point when we talk about qadr. So just looking at things, how do I reconcile this particular thing rationally? Even if you're not able to do it, maybe it's a time for you to take a spiritual route to the particular question. And that is where you'll find the area of yaqeen and certainty.
Yeah, mashallah. And so there's another key thing to remember here as well. So sometimes reason can show you the limits of reason itself. In the same way that a map maker can show you the limits of where he can draw maps to. You say back in the day there was no boats yet. And there's someone, like there's limits. He can take you so far and he can say, well, this is the limit of where you can go. Reason can do the same thing. You can use reason to say, for example, without sort of any of this, maybe say complicated scientific equipment, you go back in the day, and there's still limits today, even with this scientific equipment. For example, you can't go beyond the singularity. There's no equipment that's going to give you insight to what necessarily happened prior to the Big Bang. That can be out of the reach. Now, reason has guided you to that limit. Now, at that point, all you're left with is postulation.
Yeah.
Reason can continue to do that. It can talk about possibilities. And that's what you see, especially in a lot of this like apologetic conversations between theists and atheists. We postulate about what's possibly the case. What is it that gave rise to the Big Bang? Can you
Could
try
be a
to
very
explain
multiverse.
it? Yeah. String theories, this, that, the other. There's all of these theories, but reason can only take you so far in terms of giving you absolutes or giving you inferences to the best explanations. And then beyond that, it can continue to play, but it plays creatively at this point. It's a creative endeavor. It's postulating possibilities, and it's not really got anything to make one possibility way more than the other. And it does its best to deal with that. And this is the case with a lot of things. So the free will versus determinism. There's we can talk about it, but there's limits to that discussion. There's limits to what reason can reveal to us about that. And in the same way that at the end of that conversation, you're not going to get any absolute concrete answers. But would that motivate the atheist not having those answers, ceasing to be an atheist? Would that motivate? Why should it motivate the theist as well? It's at the end of the day, what you get to is a gray area. It's like, I don't know how this works. There's nothing necessarily in the absolute sense, conflationary between them. So what do we do with that? Allahu alam. I don't know. Why is that a problem? Do we need the answers to absolutely everything? the atheist is quite happy not having answers to things. Why can't we do the same? Why is there this imbalance here? Like it was similar. There was an apologist we were engaging with during Ramadan, and one of the things that happened was that there was an example given, and it was like, well, what would can you imagine this? What would the universe look like if there was no God? And the kid was like, I don't know. And he's like, well, and then he starts postulating that he thinks this is what the universe would look like if there was no God. And the kid was just like, I don't know what a universe would look like with no God.
Right.
Like, I have no idea. Why? How can anyone answer that question? And he's like, he's pushing him for it. He's like, no, I need an answer. And if he can't answer that, all right, no problem, goodbye. And he just ends it there because it's as if it requires an answer. The theist is required to answer it, and if he can't, it's because of some intellectual deficiency. They try to frame it, and then literally a few minutes down the line, he completely forgets what he's just done, and he switches it, and he starts talking about. He's like, "What's wrong with saying I don't know? It's praiseworthy." And he starts saying, "If you ask me questions, I'll just say I don't know." It's like, well, hold on a second, you weren't granting that to the theist a moment ago.
Right.
Why is it all of a sudden like it's this praiseworthy virtue when it's based from the atheist doing it? So you've got to keep an eye on this. You've got to know it's fine to not know things. We're not God. We're not all knowing. We are finite little beings, and we peer into fog. That's our life. We try to deal the best with that.
Right.
Go on.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, even in the Quran, when you look at the concept of yaqeen, the concept of certainty, what you find is that a lot of the concepts related to certainty are related to those things that are outside of our sensory perception, right? When you start with Surah Al-Baqarah, وَبِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ يُوقِنُونَ, and in the hereafter, they're absolutely certain. That is totally outside of sensory perception, right?
Yeah.
So how does one gain certainty about something that is outside of sensory perception? And that too, it's like an objective statement that's made, وَبِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ يُوقِنُونَ, that in the hereafter they're absolutely certain, like there's no doubt, right? Yet, if you think about something like the akhirah, something like the hereafter, there's no sensory way to come to that conclusion, with the exception of revelation. There's really no way to kind of just you don't wake up one day and say, well, I've done all the scientific analysis, and clearly there's a day of judgment and yada, 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 and there's a heaven. There's no way to do it, with the exception of revelation. And yet the people that are making this claim are saying that they're absolutely certain about it. And some of the Sahaba said that they're more certain about the hereafter than they are about things in the dunya. Right?
It's funny you say that as well, because there's that article by Paul Bloom. And this links, and it was written, it's called Religion is Natural. And so this guy was an atheist himself, so it's not like it was a theist writing it, trying to confirm his own beliefs. So he wrote this, and after basically analyzing the studies that have been done, it turns out that regardless of where you've been born and whether your parents are atheist or not, or any of these things, context doesn't seem to matter here, wherever you are on the planet. Children incline towards beliefs in the supernatural, beliefs into life after death, beliefs into the soul, or the existence of some sort of mind-body dualism. The belief in an overriding purpose in reality, that there is that things are purpose-driven. There's not just like they'll even look at things like a rock, and they'll understand it in terms of its function, like as a something to
like they're teleological realities.
Yeah. So it's everything is sort of teleologically driven for them, and this is natural for them. Like, and now obviously they need to sort of come up with some sort of naturalistic explanations for them.
Of course.
But this is common, and this is testament to the fact that there hasn't been a civilization of people that have absent ideas of these type of things. You don't have these societies that grow and function without some sort of conception of an afterlife, of a supernatural, of all of this. It's been absolutely absent throughout the entire history of humankind. And Richard Dawkins has even testified to this in his discussion with Joe Rogan on the Joe Rogan podcast, which is incredibly interesting. So there is this element that I guess you can look at that, and maybe, obviously it needs to be flushed out a bit better, but maybe there's an argument here to say that there might be some sort of scientific evidence here to suggest the reality of this thing. If you can make the link, the difficulty here is making the necessary connection. But it's interesting. It's the data is there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the challenges with you can say like naturalism, or at least methodological naturalism, is that making the link between the physical and the metaphysical is just outside the realm of naturalism itself, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously, I mean, if we're going to say, okay, the concept of a soul, all right, that's again, we're looking at a metaphysical concept. The concept of an afterlife, it's a metaphysical concept, right? Now, the fact that that the children are born upon that state, obviously, from the Islamic worldview, we say, well, yeah, that's part of the fitrah, right?
Yeah.
The fitrah testifies and brings to the forefront those realities that are confirmed, right? And they're confirmed in a number of different ways. Rationality is one way to confirm them, but it's not the only tool, right? Because rationality itself can be influenced. Like there's a saying in Urdu, it says "Akal karaya ka vakila," right? In other words, the rationality is like a lawyer for hire. Okay, so whatever your heart desires, you rationalize it. You actually give like people that go fatwa shopping. Is this haram? No. Let's ask sheikh number 2. Is it haram? No. Ask sheikh number 3 until they get to the sheikh that says, oh yeah, it's halal, right? What is that? Like that's like it's just a hired lawyer to like justify your desires, right?
Yeah.
So how many people can honestly, earnestly say my desires are completely removed and I am just working on pure rationality? Because the reality is there's no such thing as just pure rationality. You have to have something that gives it its borders and allows it to move forward. And those are those base states that we were talking about, like you were mentioning, the belief in God, the belief in the hereafter. All of those are part of the fitrah, right? That's the natural state of the human being. And, at the end, if someone denies that, they are in a state of, they're going to be in a state of disquietude, internal disquietude, and, existential disquietude. And that can be really problematic, right? As whether, one accepts it or not. Or the alternative is you just take something to kind of mask that existential crises and you do other things to fill that void, right? And so it's either like it's drugs, alcohol, marital relations, whatever it is, to just, you go day by day, right? And you just put it in a box called, I'll deal with this later. Put that, put all those issues in a box and just throw it away, right? And not worry about it. But the reality is it's still there, So yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no surprise that you would have research that states that about children, because we already know that, right? Kullu bani Adam, that every child, kullu mawludin yulidu ala fitra. Every child is born upon the fitra, like the Prophet ﷺ said, right? And there's a very long discussion related to the fitra and its details and stuff like that, which is outside the confines of today's talk. But it's a very interesting discussion when you start getting into it, and what our tradition, how much weight our tradition puts on the intuitive, natural state of the human being. Because it's by way of that natural state that we can recognize things like beauty and give it value, right? But in a cold, a cold, cerebral, naturalistic worldview, even things like beauty become meaningless,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, alhamdulillah. I think we've done a good job here of,
I think so. Yeah, we're
the 3 hour mark.
3 hours, man.
Alhamdulillah. So we'll start to wrap up here. So I just wanted to say Jazakallah khair to everyone who has joined us today. And a quick reminder to what the whole purpose of today's stream was. It's basically to introduce you to a service called Lighthouse, as you can see written along the bottom of here.
Yep.
And Lighthouse is a service, a mentoring service, which is free and available for everyone to access via the Sapiens Institute website. And I'll just pull up the website here now so you can see. So if you go to sapiensinstitute.org, you'll be brought here to this. If you just scroll down a little bit on the homepage, you'll find this light bulb under which it says Lighthouse Mentoring. Now, this service is aimed at addressing your doubts, answering questions, and mentor and empower leaders to be able to share Islam. So whether you're someone who's a Muslim currently dealing with shubahat or doubts, and you want to sort of seek advice or gain answers or help, with this, that service is for you. Or if you're an ex-Muslim and you're interested in trying to figure things out, or if you're a non-Muslim and you're interested in Islam and you want to talk to someone and go through a few of these things with someone who's trained in the area, that's for you as well. Or if you're someone who's currently a leader or someone engaged in dawah or wanting to engage in dawah, and you want to basically have someone mentor or empower you in order to become the leader that you want to become, and in order to be able to share Islam with your community or with the wider public in general, then this is also a service for you. So basically what you do is you click on that link and it takes you to here. And it obviously it goes through here who the service is for as well. So have a little quick read through that, see if it's relevant to you. And then you click book a Lighthouse mentor. And at this point, it takes you to here. You pick whether it's, are you having your doubts addressed, or if you've got questions, or if is it to do with leadership and activist mentoring. So you pick your thing, you click continue, you pick your date. We've just had someone join us on the Fridays now, so there's some earlier ones available. You click continue, and then it'll start to ask you for your information. So you get here, make sure you put specifically what you want help with. One of the problems we're having at the moment, people are just like, hi, and then they'll post the form. And then we're like, we have no idea what you want help with. These kind of requests are going to be rejected. If you don't put any information there about it, it's not going to be dealt with. It'll just be rejected. The space will be made open again. So make sure you fill this form in properly. Also, keep in mind these exclamation marks or these little points of interest. Read them. Obviously, this, I guess people don't read it for whatever reason. You should do, because here is important. But also here, so the times are automatically adjusted to your time zone. So one of the problems is people are making an appointment, they'll get the email and they'll look at the time, and then that time has been adjusted to wherever you are in the world. Now, there's a problem at the moment where people will look at that and then they'll just assume that it's the UK time, and they'll attend the UK time and they'll be like 10 hours late or 10 hours early or whatever it is. So keep that in mind. The emails are adjusted to your local time zone, and put at least something in this box here about the details with regards to the support that you require. If it's about particular doubts, put the question in. If you're having, I'm struggling with Quran, this particular verse, that particular verse, I'm struggling with particular hadith, this hadith, that hadith. Not only will this streamline the support that we can give you, because obviously if we can see with specific details the thing that you want help with, we can then go away and maybe do a bit of research if we need to prior to the session, which is going to help you greatly when it comes to the service itself. Don't make it so vague that we can't figure out whether you need help or not. And don't use it just for the sake of using it either. This service is for those who need it. And if you're just hoping like to maybe get an hour to chat with like one of the famous du'at that help us, or the hope of getting to have a conversation with them, that's the wrong intention. This isn't just so that you can sort of have friendly conversations. It's specifically for those who need it. The service is being pushed to the limit at the moment. We've already had a lot of bookings, and so it is very important that this service is obviously expanded. So you can do that as well by helping us. If you are capable of volunteering, you can volunteer here on the Sapiens Institute website as well. Request volunteering, put your information in, explain how you can volunteer, attach your CV, send that through, and then obviously we can expand the service even more. But like we say, that we've got a lot of bookings now all the way up until the end of the year, the beginning of next year. Alhamdulillah, the new, we have Imran Hussein helping us now. So that's opened up to 2 hours a week on the Friday, inshallah. So yeah, make sure to, if you need the service, make use of it. If you know people who need the service, send the link their way so that they can be aware of the services. And inshallah, support us by sharing these videos, by liking, commenting, subscribing to the channel. All of this is going to help us with the algorithm. All of this is going to help push our content out there, and inshallah increase the effectiveness of our, what we're planning here, what we're trying to do here. So I'll leave it with Brother Fahad to make some closing statements, and we'll end it there, inshallah.
Nope. So what I was going to say was this project is something that's I think it's very unique. We don't really have, as far as I know, we don't have anything comparable to it. So, even if it's not something you're interested in, there may be other people that would be interested. So try to, the least you could do is help us to get the word out. You can share this video once we've put it up. You can, obviously subscribe to our YouTube channel. But more than that, if you know people that are having doubts, they're going through certain issues, or you know someone who, let's say you're an older person and you know a young spirited individual who's really into da'wah, and you want this person to be, you know, guided and have kind of the right technique and the right way to kind of call people to Islam, which is holistic, like I mentioned in the beginning, you may want to, you know, kind of send this their way, right? Because we want as many people as possible to benefit from this. And you know, and alhamdulillah, we've had an excellent, overwhelming response. And this response has taken us all the way to December. Alhamdulillah. I would assume that within the next few months we're going to get to probably get into all of 2022 as well. So inshallah. But the thing, and I just wanted to reiterate what Yusuf was saying a few minutes ago, please, when you register, read all the details. One of the challenges, like he mentioned, you know, someone will come in and write nothing in terms of what you're dealing with, and that it helps us tremendously. I can tell you, someone that does these sessions, that has these sessions, when I know what someone's struggling with, it gives me time to, even if I'm not going to research the topic, but at least mentally prepare to see, you know, to have a better idea of where the person is. It makes the 1 hour session a lot more effective and efficient. All right. So that's number one. So make sure you fill it out with as much detail as you can. You will have a much better, robust, dynamic session when you come on and log on for that 1 hour, as opposed to us doing guesswork in terms of like, what are your issues? How is this? What is this hadith and that hadith? And, you know, all of that. So that's very important. Second thing, just to reiterate what Yusuf said, and I think the reason I'm doing this is because I have the same annoyances that Yusuf has with a lot of these.
The pet peeves, what grinds our gears.
And that has to do with the time. So make sure you understand that the email that you receive once you register is your local time. All right. Don't assume it's UK time, right? Because, but you know, this might come as a shocker. Not all of us are in the UK. Wow. Yeah. I'm sitting in Houston, Texas, right? The lone American here. But so understand the email you get is not in UK time, it's your local time. So make sure you're cognizant of that. Read the details, get the word out. And with that said, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless each and every single person that came on, that was able to engage. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless all of you, give you the best of this life and the best of the afterlife. And please forgive us if we were not able to engage with your question. If you had a doubt, we weren't able to perhaps bring you on live, or we didn't see it in the comment section. That was not intentional. And so we ask Allah, we ask you to overlook that and forgive us for that. And with that said, just to close with the dua, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Take care, everybody.